All right, hey people. Today is June 8th, 2024. I'm Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View. Anyway, by the way, I'm going to just say this up front. Anyone that comes to my channel, comes to my show, I am very much about free speech. I just ask that people try to be respectful. I know that's kind of hard to interpret what that is, right? If someone disagrees with you and you think some doctrine sounds heretical or something, I just ask that people try to keep it civil. Definitely don't cuss or anything on my channel. But other than cussing, you're pretty much allowed to speak however, like say whatever you want. If you got a view that disagrees with me, if you have a channel you want to promote, you can even promote your own channel. If you have a show going on during my show, I'll even let you. I don't ban people for anything. I let people if it's like, if you start a show during mine because you're mad at me, right, and you can even tell everybody, I'm not going to ban you, okay? Because I don't want anyone thinking I control a narrative or anything like that. I'm going out of my way to not be like all these other channels as far as that goes, okay? And I wish I could give people mods, but I don't trust a lot of people. So, or else I'd make everybody a mod. Maybe I might start another channel and do that. But anyway, so what I'm going to try to do tonight is debate the AI. And because I cannot get a Seventh-day Adventist to debate me, right? So what I'm going to do is see, because remember, I had that show where I talked, well, people are going to be like, what, which one? Because there were several shows like this, but this one recently where the show went almost 9 hours. It's only supposed to be about a 3.5 hour show, but then I wind up having this open mic. In this Seventh-day Adventist, I just wanted a simple answer to piece of this prophecy, and he would not tell me. And it was just like, well, how do you explain Daniel 8, 9 through 12? So I'm going to see about debating the AI on this. So how would the Seventh-day Adventist answer this, right? So I'm going to see if I can maybe blow this screen up a little bit. It ain't going to be perfect. Okay, so let's see here. So if I had a Seventh-day Adventist on my show, now, because I know that AI is just going to cut right to the chase. That's the thing. We're hoping that happens. And so I try to have a discussion with it to kind of prompt it a little bit. So if you were a Seventh-day Adventist and I asked you to exegete Daniel 8 verses 9 through 12, how would you exegete those verses? Remember, 4 hours and I couldn't get that answer when I did that show.
As an AI, I can provide an explanation based on the Seventh-day Adventist interpretation of Daniel 8 verses 9 to 12. Here's how a Seventh-day Adventist might exegete these verses. Daniel 8 verses 9 to 12 describes a little horn that emerges and grows in power, affecting both the earthly realm and the heavenly sanctuary. In the Adventist view, this passage is seen through a historicist lens, meaning it is interpreted as symbolic of historical events and entities. Verse 9 introduces the little horn, which is often interpreted by Adventists as representing initially the kingdom of Syria, particularly under the rule of Antiochus Epiphanes, who is known for his persecution of the Jewish people and desecration of the temple. This interpretation aligns with the historical context of the Seleucid Empire's expansion toward the beautiful land, Israel. Verses 10 to 12 describe the actions of the little horn, which include casting down some of the host and stars to the ground and trampling upon them. Adventists interpret this as symbolic of the persecution of God's people and interference with the sacrificial services, which Antiochus Epiphanes historically enacted by setting up an idol in the temple and stopping the daily sacrifices. Furthermore, the little horn's actions against the prince of the host, interpreted as a reference to the Messiah, and the taking away of the daily sacrifice are seen as significant events that affect both the earthly and heavenly sanctuaries. The casting down of the truth to the ground is understood as the distortion of God's commandments and the persecution of those who remain faithful to his word. In the broader Adventist eschatological framework, these verses also have an end-time application, where the little horn represents a future power that will similarly oppose God's law and his people. The 2,300 evenings and mornings mentioned later in the chapter are interpreted as prophetic days, equating to 2,300 years, leading to the investigative judgment that began in 1844, a key doctrine in Adventist theology. This interpretation emphasizes the continuity of prophecy from the time of Daniel to the end times, with the assurance that God remains in control and will ultimately vindicate his.
Okay, so this was kind of curious to me. So I'm not really sure where it's getting this from, but it says verse 9 introduces the little horn, which is often interpreted by Adventists as representing initially the kingdom of Syria, particularly under the rule of Antiochus Epiphanes, who is known for his persecution of the Jewish people and desecration of the temple. Now, they don't believe it's Antiochus, though. But I don't understand why it would. I'm going to have to ask the AI. Do they really believe that? I thought the Seventh-day Adventists believed the little horn was Rome or the papacy, but you're saying they think it's Syria, or am I not understanding you correctly?
I apologize for any confusion. Let me clarify the Seventh-day Adventist interpretation of the little horn in Daniel 8. Seventh-day Adventists traditionally interpret the little horn of Daniel 8 as having a dual application. Initially, it refers to the pagan Roman Empire, which succeeded the 4 divisions of Alexander's empire. This is based on the historical sequence of empires represented in the prophecy, with Rome following after Greece. In a broader eschatological context, Adventists also apply the symbol of the little horn to the papal phase of Rome. They see this as an antichrist power that arises after the division of the Roman Empire and continues into the end times, opposing God's law and persecuting his people. The reference to Syria and Antiochus Epiphanes is sometimes brought into the discussion because some scholars outside of the Adventist tradition have identified the little horn with Antiochus. However, Adventists argue that the little horn represents a greater power with a longer-lasting influence, which they identify with Rome in both its pagan and papal phases. So, to summarize, the Seventh-day Adventist interpretation of the little horn in Daniel 8 is primarily associated with Rome, encompassing both its ancient pagan form and its later papal phase, rather than with the kingdom of Syria or Antiochus Epiphanes. This interpretation aligns with their understanding of the prophecy's historical and end-time fulfillment. I hope this clears up any misunderstanding.
Okay, so now if it's having a dual application, I need to explain that dual application. Because when I'm looking at, let's see here. So they say this has got a dual application. And I'm just going over verses 9 through 12 right now. So I'm trying to figure out dual application, like where we see this in the text. From one of these horns, a little horn emerged and grew extensively towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. It grew up as high as the host of heaven and cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the earth and trampled them. It magnified itself even to the prince of the host. It removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of a sanctuary. Now, when it says the Seventh-day Adventists, when they read this text and it says it magnified itself even to the host of heaven, magnified itself as high as Jesus. So I guess that's what they're saying, is that they think it's the papacy and the Pope's the Antichrist. So the Pope is magnifying himself to be in the place of Christ, all right? So when they read that verse, they'll say, it magnified itself even to the prince of the host. It removed his daily sacrifice. So has Rome removed the daily sacrifice? See, how does this happen, right? So, because it does say it removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew his place of the sanctuary. So, what I'm going to do is ask it exactly. I'm going to copy this verse. So, just to make sure, verify that's verse 11. In Daniel 8, chapter 11, I want you to explain how the Seventh day Adventist would explain how the Prince of Hosts, who they say is Jesus, they say the little horn magnified itself to the Prince of the Host, which I'm assuming means the Pope of Rome is taking the place of Christ, and it removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. So, how did Rome or how did the papacy do this? How would they explain it?
In Seventh day Adventist interpretation, Daniel 8, verse 11 is seen as a prophecy that was fulfilled in two phases, first by pagan Rome and then by papal Rome. The Prince of the Host is understood to represent Jesus Christ, and the actions of the little horn are symbolic of the ways in which Rome, in both its pagan and papal forms, has attempted to usurp Christ's authority and alter his ministry. Here's how Seventh day Adventists might explain the actions described in Daniel 8, verse 11. It magnified itself, even to the Prince of the Host. This is interpreted as the little horn, Rome, exalting itself to a position of power and authority that belongs only to Christ. In the case of papal Rome, this is seen as the papacy assuming titles and roles that belong to Christ alone, such as head of the church or vicar of Christ, which implies a substitution for Christ on earth. It removed his daily sacrifice. The daily sacrifice is understood metaphorically. In the context of pagan Rome, it refers to the crucifixion of Christ, which put an end to the need for the daily sacrificial system of the Old Testament. In the context of papal Rome, it's seen as the papacy's establishment of the Mass, where the Eucharist is believed to be a continual sacrifice, which Adventists argue detracts from the sufficiency of Christ's once-for-all sacrifice on the cross. And overthrew the place of his sanctuary. This is seen as a reference to the destruction of the earthly temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70. In a spiritual sense, for the papal phase, it's interpreted as the papacy's teachings and practices that Adventists believe have obscured the understanding of Christ's heavenly ministry in the sanctuary above, where he serves as our high priest. Seventh day Adventists believe that these actions have significant implications for the understanding of salvation and the role of Christ as our mediator. They emphasize that only Christ can atone for sin and that any human attempt to assume his role or alter his work is a grave error. This interpretation is part of a broader Adventist theological framework that sees the history of salvation as a conflict between Christ and powers that seek to undermine his work of redemption. The prophecy of Daniel 8 is thus seen as both a historical record and trail of Christ's ministry.
Everything just had to freeze just now. Oh, that's frustrating. Is everything okay? I'm sorry about that. And it's like, seems like everything kind of froze for a minute. Seems like everything's still freezing. Not really sure what's going on with my. Sorry about that. So I think that what this AI just said. This sounds way better than what any SDA has explained this, right? So let's be fair to the AI Seventh Day Adventist, because I think this is a much more tolerable presentation so far. We're still gonna show that even as tolerable as this presentation is, they're still severely flawed. But this seems to make it just a tad bit more sense with scripture so far. So right now it's saying that this little horn Rome, it says this is interpreted as the little horn Rome exalting itself to the position of power and authority that belongs only to Christ. Well, you'd have to say the papacy. I guess maybe they might say the pagan Rome might have done that. I don't know. In the case of papal Rome, this is seen as the papacy assuming titles and roles that belong to Christ alone as the head of the church or vicar of Christ, which implies the substitution of Christ on earth. Not too bad. Like, I'm not saying that's the right interpretation, but what I'm saying is, at least I could sort of see the some of the thinking involved, right? And if we kind of ignore all the first verses that come before it. So it says it removed his daily sacrifice. The daily sacrifice is understood metaphorically. In the context of pagan Rome, it refers to the crucifixion of Christ, which put an end to the need for the daily sacrificial system of the Old Testament. In the context of papal Rome, it's seen as the papacy's establishment of Mass, where the Eucharist is believed to be a continual sacrifice, which Adventists argue detracts from the sufficiency of Christ's once for all sacrifice on the cross. Over through the place of a sanctuary. Hello, scattered sheep. This is seen as a reference to the destruction of the earthly temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 AD. In a spiritual sense, for the papacy phase, it's interpreted as the papacy's teachings and practices that Adventists believe have obscured the understanding. So let me just kind of look back at Daniel and see how I can pick this apart. And in the rebellion, the wholesome daily sacrifice were given over to the horn, and it flung truth to the ground. Okay. I want to see exactly how it interprets. You know what? I'm going to ask about the question on 13, because that's basically my biggest sticking point. So I'm going to, let's see here. I'm paste this. Then I'm going to ask. And could you explain to me how this question then would be answered by the Seventh-day Adventists?
In the context of Seventh-day Adventist interpretation, Daniel 8 verse 13 is a pivotal verse that raises a question about the duration of the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the transgression that causes desolation, and the trampling of the sanctuary and the host. The question, how long, reflects a concern for the period of suffering and apostasy that God's people would endure. The response given in Daniel 8 verse 14, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, is interpreted by Seventh-day Adventists as a prophetic timeline. They understand the 2,300 days as symbolic, representing 2,300 years in the day-year principle, which is a common method of prophetic interpretation among Adventists. This period is believed to have begun in 457 BC with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem issued by Artaxerxes I of Persia and to have ended in 1844 AD. This ending marks the beginning of what Adventists refer to as the investigative judgment, a heavenly process in which the lives of all people are reviewed before the second coming of Christ. The cleansing of the sanctuary mentioned in verse 14 is seen as the antitypical Day of Atonement, where Christ, the high priest, enters the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to perform the final atonement for humanity's sins. This is a unique doctrine to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, emphasizing the importance of 1844 and the investigative judgment in their eschatology. In summary, Seventh-day Adventists would explain Daniel 8 verses 13 to 14 as a prophecy that outlines a significant time frame in salvation history, culminating in a pre-Advent judgment that affirms God's justice and prepares the world for Christ's return. This interpretation is integral to their understanding of the prophetic messages in the book of Daniel and their broader theological framework. If you have more questions,
Yes, I definitely do. Um, okay, so with the question, I want to kind of reread it. It says, how long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice of rebellion that causes desolation and the surrender of the sanctuary and host to be trampled? Uh, so when did any of those things begin to happen in 457? So in that question that's in Daniel chapter 8 verse 13, when is any of those four things in that question done in 457 BC? Which one of those things were done?
In 457 BC, the event that aligns with the question in Daniel 8 verse 13, according to Seventh-day Adventist interpretation, is the issuing of the decree by Artaxerxes I of Persia to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. This decree is seen as the starting point for the prophetic period of 2,300 days, which Adventists interpret as 2,300 years, leading up to the year 1844 AD. The decree by Artaxerxes is recorded in Ezra 7 verses 8 and 9 and is considered significant because it specifically mentions the restoration of Jerusalem, which includes its government and judicial systems, not just the temple. This is seen as fulfilling the prophecy of the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, as mentioned in Daniel 9 verse 25. The other elements of the question in Daniel 8 verse 13, regarding the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and host to be trampled, are understood to unfold over the course of the 2,300 years. The daily sacrifice is interpreted as the continual priestly ministry of Christ in the heavenly sanctuary, which Adventists believe was obscured by the earthly priesthood established by the papacy. The rebellion that causes desolation and the trampling are seen as the actions of the little horn power, which they identify with both pagan and papal Rome, opposing God's true worship and persecuting his people. Thus, in 457 BC, the specific action taken was the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, which set in motion the prophetic timeline leading to the investigative judgment that Seventh-day Adventists believe began in 1844. If you have more questions or need additional information,
Definitely got more questions. I'm reading Ezra chapter 7, and it looks like to me the exact opposite is going on from what I'm reading in verses Daniel chapter 8, 9 through 12, and what that question pertains to. So, how do they, I guess, rectify this? Because I'm confused because it looks like something horrible is happening in those verses, yet when I read Ezra it seems like the exact opposite. In fact, it looks like it's the end of the 2300 days because it looks like everything is being restored, so it looks like it's backwards to me. Could you please explain this?
the apparent contradiction you're noticing between the events described in Ezra 7 and Daniel 8 verses 9 to 12 is a common point of discussion. Seventh-day Adventists reconcile these passages by viewing them as parts of a larger prophetic framework that spans a significant period of history. In Ezra 7, the focus is on the decree of Artaxerxes I, which is seen as a positive development for the Jewish people, allowing them to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. This decree is considered the starting point of the prophetic timeline of 2,300 days per year, marking a period of restoration and renewal. On the other hand, Daniel 8 verses 9 to 12 describes a series of negative events, including the rise of a little horn power that causes desolation and opposes the divine order. Seventh-day Adventists interpret this as a separate part of the prophecy that unfolds over the course of the 2,300 years, culminating in the cleansing of the sanctuary or the investigative judgment that begins in 1844. The horrible events in Daniel 8 are understood to occur within the time frame of the 2,300 years, but are not directly related to the starting point marked by the decree in Ezra 7. Instead, they represent different phases of opposition and persecution that God's people would face at various times throughout history. Seventh-day Adventists believe that the end of the 2,300 years is not marked by the physical restoration of Jerusalem, but by a spiritual event, the beginning of the investigative judgment in heaven. This is seen as a time when Christ enters the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to perform a final atonement for humanity's sins. This interpretation allows them to maintain the continuity of the prophecy from the time of the decree in Ezra 7 to the eschatological events they believe began in 1844. It's a complex theological construct that requires understanding the Adventist perspective on prophetic interpretation, including the day-year principle and the historicist approach to prophecy. I hope this explanation helps clarify how Seventh-day Adventists reconcile the passages in Ezra and Daniel.
Yes, it does clarify. Oh my gosh, I think I'm seeing the light here. Oh boy, you know what? I'm seeing the light. This is amazing. Oh my gosh, I feel so embarrassed. I got an ideal. I got a great ideal. All right. Because what I could do is I could pick a different spot, a spot I like better to start the 2300, right? And I can just say, "Oh, it just happens any of this stuff just happens anywhere in there." I can be like, "You know what? It's supposed to be like a." I can maybe even try to find something else in the Bible, like where I pick a date and I plan it out, and I'm like, "Oh, I got hit with a rock in my head, and I had a vision, and I got a prophecy from Jesus that he went into that there's something that went on in heaven, and people can be like, well, you know, what about all these details? I'm be like, well, they just happened during this 2,300 years, all right? You know, I can pull the same stunt, right? I can maybe have a I got a 6,000 year prophecy, right? Like it kind of starts to lose its point, right? When you go, oh well, it can happen anywhere, right? It's like no longer does this time span mean anything. See, when we were given this 2,300 evening and morning time span, if it's like a 3.5 year period, or so, some people were interpreting it as a 6 year period, depending on how you interpret that. I personally think it's evening morning sacrifices, which is 2 a day, so it's 1,150 days. But there's been other interpretations where people think it's Antiochus also, but they think it they think something happened with the priesthood. It got corrupted. So, but from the time the priesthood got corrupted over this 6 year period, that they think the sacrifices were interrupted because it was a corrupt priesthood. The wrong people were running the thing. That's their argument. But to me, it just kind of seems like once we get beyond this point, right, and I can just start going over thousands of years, like could I maybe find someplace in the book and do a similar thing and just be like, well, it's just events that happen within, but we're still right, but it's just happened within the 3,000 years, the 4,000 years, but that's still, it's like, to me, that's not even that's not a very impressive prophecy. It's more impressive if there's actual events that actually match up real close to history, like the the regular way you would interpret Daniel 8, that almost all the Christians and all the Jews had interpreted it, which was it was Antiochus, Greek king conquering Media Persia. His four generals take over, so that's the four horns, and then out of one of them comes a little horn that magnifies itself, which Antiochus Epiphanes did, and then he goes and persecutes the Jews brutally, you know, and basically he does oppose their religion. And to me, that matches up real good. And later on in the prophecy, it says he dies without hand. Oh, he died of like some kind of odd ailment or something. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Also, there's a time period, where the 1,150 days matches up, where after he is turned away from, he wanted to go conquer Egypt, but he gets turned away by the Roman envoy, and he gets turned away, And from that point on until the time period in Maccabees ends, is you can fit a 1,150 day period in there, right? So it's like everything matches up and everything fits and everything looks good. And you even have the Jews, kind of saying this, that's even when they have Hanukkah. It was a huge deal. Like, okay, think about how. I mean, people keep wanting to say, "Oh, this wasn't significant." The Jews were the only people in the world keeping God's religion at the time. So, and you have one of the biggest, you have one of the strongest armies in the world coming against your people, telling you can't practice your religion at all, trying to wipe your religion out. And afterwards, like the Jews don't create a lot of holidays, right? It's like we only know of like what's it called? Purim. I think it's Purim. They got Purim. I think that's one that they created, and then they created another one called Hanukkah. So it's probably a significant event. I wouldn't say it's a not that significant, especially in the context of like God's people, the only people in the world, and being persecuted that severely. It probably looked pretty apocalyptic. Anyway, I'm going to read just a couple of comments because. All right, Eric, thanks for stopping by, man. He says 4 things in Daniel 8:13 that needs to happen before the end of the 2300, not at the beginning. Well, no, see, like I said, when we say it can happen by the end, it's got to happen by the end. That's not. Is that a real impressive prophecy? Especially if you can just take and make those words mean anything you want. And then it's like, well, if you think they're that vague, I don't even know why an atheist or anyone would even believe this is God's word, because the way we're just twisting it around to mean anything, and it can be fulfilled in 2,000, 3,000 years. Whoa, that's such a prophecy. And it's like, I think you're at that point, we're kind of like hurting the whole point of prophecy. So, I mean, that would just kind of be my argument there. And you said the beginning was definitely a positive thing. Well, according to this, I don't read nothing about the beginning being positive, but let's see here. So so you're saying this is supposed to be at the beginning. And so let's see here. How long until the fulfillment of the vision? So what 4 things are included in this? The daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary to be and the host to be trampled. It looks like this question is only how long all these things in verse 9 are supposed to be. We don't see anything about a temple being built. In fact, the temple's already built according to this, right? So if the temple's already built according to this, then this is happening after it's been restored. And look, if you look earlier, it's after 324 BC. So I think this is what I'm going to ask the AI here. My next question should be, oh, I had a better one and it just escaped me. So let me kind of read what the AI told me, and I can probably think of it. So it says the horrible events in Daniel 8 are understood to occur within the time frame of the 2300, but are not directly related to the starting point marked. It seems like that question in Daniel chapter 8, verse 13 is specifically bringing up those events. So I don't understand why, if it's bringing up those specific 4 events in the question, and we know that question happens in regards, or hold on, I gotta stop. Let's see here. Let me ask this question while I think of this other question. We know the large horn represents Alexander the Great, and we know Alexander the Great died in around 324 BC. And Seventh-day Adventists will even agree with that, period. So what my next question is, we know that that little horn comes after that large horn is broken, period. We know that is after 324 BC, period. Now, what I'm asking is, how is that question asking about something? Oh, hold on. Oh, gosh. I guess it's going. Let's just see what it spits out. I wanted to I might have to stop it, but I'm going to see what it says. Oh, you know what? Here, let me just re-ask this. 'Cause I'm not. Okay, so I said, we know that the large horn represents Alexander the Great, and we know Alexander the Great died around 324 BC, and Seventh-day Adventist, put an S on it, will even agree with that. So what my next question is, we know that the little horn comes it comes after the large horn is broken. We know that is after the I said period. I didn't want to do that though. We know that comes after 324 BC. Gotta get rid of all this. It seems to me that question in verse 13 is only asking about the activities going on after the large horn is broken. So how can that possibly apply to 457 BC? There we go. No,
The
I do
Seventh-day
answer 'em.
Adventist
You guys don't
interpretation of the
answer mine.
prophecy in Daniel 8, particularly the question in verse 13, is indeed centered on the activities that occur after the large horn, representing Alexander the Great, is broken. The little horn, which arises afterward, is interpreted by Adventists as a symbol of Rome in its successive phases, pagan and papal. The connection to 457 BC comes from the Adventist interpretation of the prophetic timeline that begins with the decree of Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem. They apply the day-year principle to the 2,300 evenings and mornings mentioned in Daniel 8 verse 14, interpreting them as 2,300 years. This period is believed to start with the decree in 457 BC and end in 1844 AD, which they see as the beginning of the investigative judgment. The question in Daniel 8 verse 13 is understood to be asking about the duration of the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression that causes desolation, which includes the period of the little horn's activities. The Adventists see these activities as spanning a long historical period that includes the rise and influence of Rome, both before and after Christ's earthly ministry. So, while the little horn's activities described in Daniel 8 verses 9 to 12 occur after Alexander's empire is divided post 324 BC, the starting point of the 2,300-year period is tied to the decree in 457 BC. This is because the Adventists view the prophecy as encompassing a broader historical narrative that includes not just the actions of the little horn, but also the restoration efforts that began with Artaxerxes' decree. This interpretation relies on a historicist approach to prophecy, where the events described in Daniel are seen as
Okay, let me answer this question or this comment real quick though. He says, "I'll leave and go listen to ADL or Kenhurst SDA. I find it painful to listen." You know what? Here's the thing. I find it painful when I had Seventh-day Adventists on my show for 4 hours and couldn't answer this question. So I'm resorting to this AI, which is seeming to give better responses and definitely doing it faster. I now have something to engage with instead of, I don't know why I'm interpreting this like this, right? Because it's real, when you read this Daniel 8, right? Since you want to say like ignorant sounding stuff to me, when I'm reading this, how in the world, when you read that question on that screen right here, verse 13 says, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, another holy one said to me, how long until the fulfillment of the vision?" Okay, so what's in this vision? Of the daily sacrifice, okay, the rebellion that causes desolation and surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled. Okay, right here, basic reading comprehension. We know it's not asking about anything that happens from verse 1 through 8. And that's done. So it's got to be an event that happens after 324 BC when the large horn is broken. Simple as that. Simple. Anyone with basic reading comprehension, like if I wrote a similar story, similar prophecy, or just a similar story about someone having a prophecy, and we get down to here, everyone's going to be like, oh, it's only talking about this, right? If I say like earlier I said I wrote this imaginary prophecy, right? Where the other day I saw a vision. A flaming bird was terrifying a desert land. Then I saw a camel shooting water out of its mouth in a rage, and the bird lost its fire, and it was scared, and it hid. The bird had 3 children, and then died during the great splitting of the earth. Only one of the 3 birds gave birth to offspring, and when that offspring grew large, it exacted revenge on the offspring of the camel, attacking their food supply and water. Then I heard an angel say, "Oh, how long will this go on?" And the other angel says, "For 100 days, and then it will cease." Okay, now if I had, like, let's say we knew when the great splitting of the earth was, we would then have a date, right? But not only that, when you're simply reading this, so when you're simply reading this right here, if I go, so does this happen? Okay, so does the offspring exact revenge on the camel's offspring before or after the great earthquake? Everyone would say after the great earthquake. Okay, so the question then is, if I go, how long will this attack last for? You are going to look for an event that happens after the great splitting of the earth, right? Or the great earthquake, right? You're going to look for event after. So same thing with this. We're going to apply the same basic reading comprehension, because I would beat someone if I sent my kid to school and the teacher goes, "Okay, class, Henry, answer this question. Um, in verse 13, when it's asking about when this event will happen, will it happen before the large horn is broken or after?" If my kid goes, "Oh, after," if that teacher goes, "You know what, Henry, that's not right," I would beat that teacher, because that's the same thing as saying, like sending my kid to school for math, and my kid goes, and the teacher goes, "What's 2 + 2?" My kid goes, "4," and the teacher's like, "No, no, 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 it's 7." I'd beat that teacher. I would lose my mind. I would lose my mind, because I'm like, you're not going to mess with my kid's mind like that. And so if you can actually do that to a kid, and because I know some of you sit there and teach them stuff, it's like, how would you even think of that? What even crosses your mind to go, it's got to be talking about something that happens before the large horn's broken, which is in 324 BC, right? It's not even reading. Let's see how the AI answers this, because I think that's just horrible reading comprehension. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that I have good reading comprehension and that I'm not losing my mind. So basically, when I'm reading Daniel 8, I'm thinking that large horns broken in 324 BC, because that's Alexander the Great. We all agree on it. And then I'm just very confused as to how, when all these activities are about the little horn, and that question is asked, and when that question is asked, it's only talking about the activities of the little horn. Why in the world, like if I was sitting in a class and a teacher asked me that question, like, so does this event, does this 2300 days or 2300 evening mornings, does this happen before or after the large horn is broken? And if I told the teacher, oh yes, this happens after the large horn is broken, if the teacher told me, nope, you got it wrong, I'd be kind of upset and frustrated. So can you please explain to me how I am missing this with my reading comprehension? Sure, Josh, why not, man?
Your reading comprehension is fine, and your question is very valid. The prophecy in Daniel 8 and its interpretation, especially regarding the 2,300 evening and mornings, can indeed be confusing. Let me try to clarify this from the Seventh day Adventist perspective, which involves a particular approach to prophetic interpretation. The large horn that is broken, representing Alexander the Great, is agreed upon by many to have occurred around 323 BC. The little horn that arises after the large horn is broken is interpreted by Seventh day Adventists as representing the Roman Empire, which historically rose to power after the division of Alexander's empire. The question in Daniel 8 verse 13 about the 2,300 evening and mornings is understood by Seventh day Adventists to be asking about the duration of the entire vision, which includes the activities of the little horn but is not limited to them. The starting point for these 2,300 days is tied to the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 457 BC, which is earlier than the breaking of the large horn. This is because they apply the day-year principle, interpreting the 2,300 evening and mornings as 2,300 years, which span from the decree in 457 BC to the year 1844 AD. So, in the classroom scenario you described, the confusion arises from the difference between the historical sequence of events and the prophetic timeline as interpreted by Seventh day Adventists. While the historical events concerning the little horn occur after the breaking of the large horn, the prophetic timeline of 2,300 years begins earlier with the decree in 457 BC. This interpretation is unique to Seventh day Adventism and is not a straightforward reading of the text. It's based on their broader theological framework and method of interpreting prophecy, which includes the day-year principle and a historical.
All right, hey Josh.
Hey, what's up, Chris?
Not much, man. I just kind of wanted to go through some Seventh day Adventist stuff and see, because I've had several shows with Seventh day Adventists, right, where I try to ask them just a simple question, and it's like 4 hours later, I still don't have my answer, right? So basically, I got the ideal recently. Why don't I just try to talk to the AI like it was Seventh day Adventist and see what it can come up with? And so far, I'm making, like, if I were to try to get this out of a Seventh day Adventist, it would have took me probably 100 hours. The way they just jump around and they get really convoluted, because I feel like I'm asking very simple questions, you know.
Yeah, I'm here for the ride. I'm just grabbing a Gatorade from the store, but I'm gonna be settled
Oh,
in here
that's
in about 5 minutes. But I'm gonna hang out and engage.
all right. That's fine. I'm not sure how long I'm going to do this show, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the AI a couple more questions. Um,
Let's do it. Let's see what they say.
So I'm curious, like, why in the world would they need Daniel 9, and what in the text of Daniel 8 makes someone think that you have to use Daniel 9 to come up with the starting date, when the question in verse 13 of Daniel 8 already gives us events for this 2300 period? So why don't we just find similar events in history and that match up to this period of 2300, where someone either thinks it's 2300 days or 2300 evening morning sacrifices equaling 1150 days? I don't understand why the Seventh day Adventists are coming up with this 457, and what we're in the text of chapter 8 or chapter 9, where do they see this connection where we have to force both prophecies to connect? I'm not getting it.
It sounds like taking the.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's going to start speaking.
The connection between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9 is a key aspect of Seventh-day Adventist interpretation of prophecy, and it's understandable that it can be confusing. Here's how they see the connection. In Daniel 8, the vision of the 2,300 evening and mornings is given without a clear starting point. Daniel is troubled by the vision, particularly by the time period, which he does not understand. In Daniel 9, Daniel prays for understanding about the desolation of Jerusalem and the duration of the exile. It is during this prayer that the angel Gabriel comes to give Daniel insight and understanding. Gabriel tells Daniel about the 70 weeks that are decreed for his people and the holy city, Daniel 9 verse 24. Seventh-day Adventists interpret the 70 weeks as part of the 2,300 days, with the 70 weeks providing the starting point for the entire prophecy. They use the day-year principle, where a prophetic day is understood to represent a literal year, to extend the 70 weeks into a period of 490 years, which they believe starts with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. The decree to rebuild Jerusalem is found in Ezra 7, and the Seventh-day Adventists identify the decree issued by Artaxerxes in 457 BC as the starting point. This is because it is the most comprehensive of the decrees, addressing not only the rebuilding of the temple, but also the restoration of judicial law and governance for the Israelites. By connecting the 70 weeks of Daniel 9 with the 2,300 days of Daniel 8, Seventh-day Adventists conclude that the two prophecies share the same starting point. Thus, the 2,300-day prophecy extends beyond the 70 weeks to reach to 1844, which they believe marks the beginning of the investigative judgment. This interpretation relies on a historicist approach to prophecy, which sees biblical prophecies as unfolding throughout history, and the day-year principle, which extends the time periods to cover.
I don't think it gave me a response, though, because it just says it's without a clear starting point. That's their it doesn't have a clear starting point, but it still gives you what's going to happen, so you know, because it's specifically telling you, asking you about four things. How long will the fulfillment of the vision? How long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the host to be trampled? This is all it's asking about, the duration of this particular thing. And what it sounds like is when this starts happening, the sanctuary is in a state of disorder, right? And then it needs to be restored after that. So
is this a paid AI? Like you have to pay for this one?
Oh, no. This is a Bing AI off of Microsoft Bing.
So it's just like open source, free or whatever?
Yeah, right now it's free. They haven't started charging yet for it, but
they have like a free trial version or something?
Oh no, it's just completely free for right now. They kind of nerfed it though, man. It was really interesting a little over a year ago. I used to get some really good stuff, and now it won't go into certain databases, and it's restricted from reading certain PDFs. It used to be able to watch a video for you, and you could ask it specific questions, and the thing even could tell. This is what kind of was mind-blowing to me. The thing could tell if someone was getting upset in the video and things like that. And I was like, how do you know this? And it's like, I can tell by tone of voice. So it was monitoring all this stuff. But now if you try to ask it, it's because I thought at first maybe it was just reading a transcript. And I was really impressed that it could tell, like, when two people were debating and exactly who was, when the one person was talking and the other person would start. And because it's, when you're reading a transcript, sometimes you don't really see that. And I was like, wow, how did it? And I was asking, how do you know all this stuff? And it was giving me all these like variables and things. And then I tried to do that like about a month later. And it was like, what are you talking about? I can't do that. But dude, that thing used to be some mind-blowing stuff, man. It's sad that they kind of nerfed it.
Well, I feel like that's how they get you. They give you the good stuff first, and then they take it away, and then they're like, "Oh, you want the better stuff? You got to pay for it."
You know what, dude? If I could find it to where it was doing all that, it would be way worth it, because you know how hard it could be, man. Like, because there's some debates that I would like to watch, but you start to run out of time, and it'd be really good to be like, hey, can you just find like whether, and you can maybe guess at certain points they might cover, and you can say, is there a point in this video where someone covered this? Or maybe you watched an old video and you remember someone talking about, but the debate was like 4 hours long, and you're like, oh man, it would be so cool if the AI could just go and be like, hey, where's that one part where they were discussing this? And the AI can go and find it. Like it used to be able to do that.
Would it take a while to process it, or was it pretty
Nah,
quick?
man, it was almost instantly.
Oh man, I was just gonna say right now when you were engaging the AI, it did sound like kind of a lengthy question on your part. So I don't know if maybe shorter, more direct questions will get you straighter answers, or have you tried that before?
Well, the thing is though, I also want to make sure like when it's kind of like in its data banks that it's understanding like all the little particulars I'm looking for, because I don't want a super generic answer. I'm looking for something specific. So I'm trying to force it into a parameter and make it answer that parameter. That's why I have to add those little details, because I already know what it might spit out. So I'm trying to cut it off at the pass and make sure I tighten it up and I keep it channeled into a certain lane so it answers the question a certain way without saying a page of stuff that's irrelevant. So that's basically why I sometimes make these questions a little lengthy. But I'm going to ask it like, how in the world, where in the text does it see that we should connect the prophecy? That like, I'm just going to ask it that question. Where in the text do SDAs read Daniel 8 or Daniel 9 where they see like the text actually confirming that this is how you should connect them? Like, because when I keep reading this, I see nothing in the text as to why I should connect these two prophecies. Let's say Daniel 8, but it'll probably correct it. Yeah, there it goes. This thing's smart, man.
The connection Seventh-day Adventists make between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9 is based on their interpretation of the texts and the broader context of the prophecies. They see Daniel 9 as providing the clarification and starting point for the prophecy given in Daniel 8, particularly the 2,300 evening and mornings. In Daniel 8, after receiving the vision, Daniel is left confused and seeks understanding, especially regarding the time period mentioned. Daniel 9 opens with Daniel studying the scriptures and praying for insight into the duration of Jerusalem's desolation. It is during this prayer that the angel Gabriel returns to give Daniel wisdom and understanding, which Adventists interpret as a direct continuation of the conversation from Daniel 8. Gabriel explains the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9 verses 24 to 27, which Adventists believe is a part of the 2,300-day prophecy from Daniel 8 verse 14. They interpret the 70 weeks as 490 years, starting with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. This decree is identified as the one issued by Artaxerxes in 457 BC, which they consider the most comprehensive and fitting the description given in the prophecy. The key verse that connects the two chapters for Seventh-day Adventists is Daniel 9 verse 23, where Gabriel tells Daniel, "At the beginning of your supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision." They interpret the vision as referring back to the vision of the 2,300 days in Daniel 8, which had not been fully explained to Daniel until this point. This interpretation is not explicitly stated in the text, but is derived from their understanding of the prophecies as a whole and the historical context they believe is represented in the visions. It's a theological construct that is unique to Seventh-day Adventism and is part of their distinctive eschatological framework. The connection between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9 is considered critical.
Okay, so we don't need to read the rest because it's just going to say some stuff that a bunch of. But basically, so it says Gabriel explains the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9, 24 through 27, which Adventists believe is part of the 2,300-day prophecy from Daniel 8, 14. They interpret this, no, not this part down here, sorry. The key verse that connects the two chapters for the Seventh-day Adventists is Daniel 9, 23, where Gabriel tells Daniel, at the beginning of your supplications, the commandment came forth, and I have come to show you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, and understand the matter and consider the vision. They interpret the vision as referring back to the 2300 days in Daniel 8, which had not been fully explained until this point. Who says it has not been explained to Daniel until this point? Who says that? I mean, it looked like the angel was already done explaining it. He goes and explains it from verses, what is it, like 20 through, I think it's like 28 is like the whole explanation. So he is explaining it. So or 20 through 27. That's when it gets explained in chapter 8. So and now it's just saying seal up the vision. So they're not planning on telling them anymore. It says now you must seal up the vision, for it concerns a distant future, right? So and it says the vision of the evening mornings, not the years or anything like that, just the evening mornings. And that's kind of weird, the vision of the evening mornings. It's probably because it's referring to sacrifices, because that's what the daily was. Two sacrifices a day, an evening and a morning, a boker and an Arab, right? So that's probably why they even stressed down here the vision of the evening mornings. But yet, Seventh-day Adventists want to convert it to days and then convert it to years. It doesn't say the vision of the yamim, right? That would be plural for years in Hebrew. So it doesn't say that. So I'm going to ask the AI. It seems like it seems like quite the assertion by the Seventh-day Adventists, hold on. Don't. I gotta redo this again. It seems like quite the assertion that vision in Daniel 9, verse 23 is referring to the 2300 spoken of in Daniel 8, when there's nothing in this text as I'm reading it in chapter 9 to make me think that it has any connection to it, period. Because Daniel is praying about the 70 weeks of captivity, and he's reading Jeremiah's prophecy. So this, when it says, I've come to give you the, let's see here, the vision, consider the vision. When it says consider the vision, it's probably talking about the vision they're about ready to give, not the other vision in chapter 8. So where do they get this assertion that this is referring to the 2300? See, that's what they got to come up with, like that assertion.
Is it thinking?
Yeah.
The connection Seventh-day Adventists make between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9, particularly the assertion that the vision in Daniel 9 verse 23 refers to the 2,300 days mentioned in Daniel 8, is indeed not explicitly stated in the text. This connection is part of their interpretive framework, which is based on a particular understanding of prophetic continuity and the historicist method of interpretation. Seventh-day Adventists believe that the angel Gabriel's return in Daniel 9 to give Daniel insight and understanding is a continuation of the explanation that was not completed in Daniel 8, where the vision of the 2,300 days left Daniel perplexed. They interpret Gabriel's statement in Daniel 9 verse 23, consider the vision, as referring back to the vision in Daniel 8 because Daniel had been contemplating the meaning of the 2,300 days and seeking understanding. This interpretation is supported by the broader context of the prophecies and
where in the text in Daniel 9 does it say Daniel was contemplating the vision that was given in Daniel 8? Because when I'm reading this text, the only thing he's talking about is his people, worrying about them, and Jeremiah's prophecy. I don't see one reference to Daniel chapter 8 or that prophecy.
You're correct that Daniel 9 does not explicitly state that Daniel was contemplating the vision from Daniel 8. The text of Daniel 9 focuses on Daniel's prayer for his people and his concern for the prophecy of Jeremiah regarding the 70 years of desolation of Jerusalem. There is no direct mention of the vision of the 2,300 days from Daniel 8 within the text of Daniel 9. The connection that Seventh-day Adventists make between the two chapters is based on their interpretive framework, which sees the angel Gabriel's message in Daniel 9 as a continuation of the explanation of the vision in Daniel 8. This is inferred from the fact that Gabriel appears in both chapters and that Daniel is seeking understanding of a vision at the time of Gabriel's visit in Daniel 9. In Daniel 9 verses 21 to 23, Gabriel comes to Daniel to give him skill and understanding and to tell him that he is greatly beloved. The phrase, "consider the vision," in verse 23 is interpreted by Seventh-day Adventists to mean that Gabriel is continuing the explanation of the previous vision, which included the 2,300 days. However, this is an interpretation and not a plainly stated connection in the text itself. The Seventh-day Adventist interpretation relies on a broader reading of the prophetic books and an understanding of the prophecies as interconnected. It's part of their unique theological perspective and is not a universally held view among all Christian denominations. It's important to approach these texts with an understanding that different.
So far, it seems like they're really grasping at straws to try to connect this and try to weave in their interpretive explanation. So, can you give me something or anything at all that would make me think that this is such a strong interpretation?
The AI does sound a little bit Seventh-day Adventist-y.
Well, I'm hoping it will. It doesn't sound as good
The
as it did
strength
this
of the
one
Seventh-day
day.
Adventist SDA interpretation of Daniel 8 and 9 lies in their comprehensive approach to biblical prophecy, which seeks to find a coherent narrative across various prophetic texts. They view the prophecies as interconnected, with each part contributing to a larger eschatological framework. Here are some points that SDAs might argue to support the strength of their interpretation. Historicist approach. SDAs employ a historicist approach to prophecy, which interprets the visions of Daniel as unfolding throughout history. This method.
Well, I'm not going to listen to all that because I'm just seeing a bunch of stuff that just doesn't look very impressive to me because I'm trying to find the strongest point possible and I just don't see it. Because, when you're reading this text plainly, we just read all their proof for Daniel 9 as to why you connect them. Oh, because there's the word vision in Daniel 9. And verse 23, I'm just going to go to Daniel 9 real quick. So just go down to verse 23. And at the beginning of your petitions, an answer went out, and I have come to tell you because you are highly precious. So consider the message and understand the vision. I mean, like, why? It looks like it's talking about this following vision right here from verses 24 on down, not anything else. He wasn't praying about anything else. There's nothing. I want to see what is in verses 1. Here, I'll ask the AI this question. What's in verses 1 through 23? I'll give it all the way up to 23 to make me think that, or not 23, because that's when they find that word vision. So it's got to happen before 1 through 22 to make me think that that word vision connects back to chapter 8. So let's see here. In Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 through 22, what is in that text that would make me think that it has anything to do with Daniel chapter 8? Because it's got to, or else you cannot say that word vision in 23 has something to do with that if it can't find nothing. So it's got to find something, because if that wasn't what Daniel was praying
The text
about.
of Daniel 9 verses 1 to 22 itself does not explicitly connect back to the vision of the 2,300 days in Daniel 8. Daniel's prayer in chapter 9 is focused on the desolation of Jerusalem and the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy regarding the 70 years of exile. However, Seventh-day Adventists and some other scholars see a connection between the two chapters based on several factors. The presence of Gabriel. Gabriel appears in both chapters, first in Daniel 8 to explain the vision to Daniel, and then again in Daniel 9 to give him understanding. In both instances, Gabriel's role is to provide insight into prophetic visions. The command to understand. In Daniel 8 verse 16, Gabriel is instructed to make Daniel understand the vision, and in Daniel 9 verse 22, he arrives to give Daniel skill and understanding. This suggests a continuation of the explanation that began in chapter 8. The use of the term Mare. The term Mare, vision, is used in both chapters in reference to the time portion of the vision. In Daniel 8 verse 26, it refers to the vision of the evenings and mornings, and in Daniel 9 verse 23, Gabriel tells Daniel to consider the vision, Mare, which some interpret as referring back to the vision in chapter 8. The unexplained time element. Daniel 8 concludes with Daniel not fully understanding the vision, particularly the time element. In Daniel 9, Gabriel comes to provide understanding, which some scholars link to the unexplained time element from the previous chapter. Theological and thematic links. Some interpretations suggest that the themes of desolation and restoration in Daniel 9 are related to the events described in Daniel 8, particularly the actions of the little horn and the impact on the sanctuary. The structure of the book. The organization of the book of Daniel is not strictly chronological, and the placement of chapters 8 and 9 next to each other is seen by some as intentional, indicating a connection between the visions. While these points suggest a connection between Daniel 8,
It's not going to say anything worth mentioning. Yeah, this whole thing with the mare, just because it uses a similar Hebrew word in both chapters, that to me is not good enough. Like if I say I had a vision, and like maybe you got sight vision, you got you got different words in English, and you got the same words mean the same things. I don't know. It's like, to me, it's like stretchy. Just because you see a similar Hebrew word in both chapters doesn't mean it's talking about the same thing, especially when the entire chapter leading up to verse 9:23, and it never even brought this up one time. It doesn't even look like it's on Daniel's mind. So why would it be connected?
Did you see the comment that says they try to link it with 921?
Yeah, okay, let's see here. So Gabriel, Daniel 9:21 through 23, Gabriel vision, understanding, but first they ruined Daniel 8 by saying that Antiochus can't be exceeding great while Alexander's just great. Yeah, that's a completely I covered that in my last video, because in my video about which was it? It's a video I did a couple of days ago. I went over that point, but yeah, they take and twist this terminology, and because it's more like expansive. It's talking more about the expansiveness of what the little horn does, because it says from one of these horns a little horn emerged and grew extensively. So this not is so exceedingly is not. It's more like it just kind of grew an expansiveness, right? Like this kingdom grew in expansiveness. So towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land, it grew as high as the host of heaven, which Antiochus did. It should be magnified, would be a better word than grow. It magnified itself as high as the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to earth and trampled them. It magnified itself even to the prince of the host. It removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. So, this is clearly saying it overthrew the place of his sanctuary, but I just have a problem, because if you try to say, well, this is Rome, well, that happened in 70 AD, and why don't we see a sanctuary on earth restored? And we only see the one sanctuary in here, but the Seventh-day Adventists will say this sanctuary down in verse 14 is talking about the heavenly sanctuary. Well, I only see sanctuary mentioned one time leading up to this. Right, well, twice. I see it in this question. But before we get to that question and this answer down here, I only see it mentioned one time. So is this sanctuary a heavenly sanctuary or not? It can only be one or the other. I don't see a transition from a earthly to heavenly. I don't understand how it can be both. And you guys try to say, oh, it's a dual prophecy, but it doesn't even make sense. Like, how is it a dual prophecy? Like, you cannot, like, you have to interpret this and consistently interpret the rest of the Bible that way. And if you were to consistently interpret the rest of the Bible the way you choose to interpret this, the rest of the Bible's not going to make sense. You just, like a person should be able to see, okay, his sanctuary, it's only one sanctuary or the other. So if you're saying this is Rome or the papacy and it overthrew the place of his sanctuary, I mean, is this the heavenly sanctuary or not? If you're saying it's the papacy that overthrew his heavenly or his earthly sanctuary by, I don't know, having the whatever Catholic things going on, and you're saying, well, it's substituting it, it's taking its place. Well, then after in 1844, something should have happened to the papacy, right? Or something should have changed, but we don't see that. And so I'm kind of confused here. I'm going to ask the AI one more question. How was the sanctuary restored in 1844? Because I don't think I have a clear answer from a Seventh-day Adventist on this. Because they say investigative judgment. Doesn't that mean the sanctuary is still dirty?
In Seventh-day Adventist theology, the concept of the sanctuary being restored in 1844 does not refer to a physical structure, but to a spiritual and heavenly event. They believe that in 1844, Jesus Christ began the final phase of his ministry in the heavenly sanctuary, which involves a process of investigative judgment. This belief is based on their interpretation of the prophecy in Daniel 8 verse 14 regarding the 2,300 days, which they understand as 2,300 years, ending in 1844. According to this interpretation, the cleansing of the sanctuary mentioned in Daniel 8 verse 14 is seen as a symbolic representation of Jesus moving from the first compartment, the holy place, to the second compartment, the most holy place, of the heavenly sanctuary to perform this work of investigative judgment. This event is believed to be part of the ultimate disposition of all sin, typified by the cleansing of the ancient Hebrew sanctuary on the Day of Atonement. The investigative judgment is viewed as a time when the lives of all people are reviewed before the second coming of Christ. It is said to reveal to heavenly intelligences who among the dead are asleep in Christ and therefore deemed worthy to have part in the first resurrection, as well as who among the living are abiding in Christ, keeping the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, and are therefore ready for translation into his everlasting kingdom. This understanding of the sanctuary's restoration is unique to Seventh-day Adventist doctrine and forms a central part of their eschatological beliefs. It is not a physical restoration, but a spiritual event with significant implications for their theology of salvation and the end times. If you have more questions or need further explanation on this topic, feel free to ask.
How was the heavenly sanctuary cleansed if this is something that happens in the heavens? Because I could have swore that these sins have to be put on Satan.
The cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary, as understood by Seventh-day Adventists, is a spiritual event that began in 1844 and is part of Christ's ongoing ministry in heaven. This belief is based on their interpretation of the 2,300-day prophecy in Daniel 8 verse 14, which they understand as 2,300 years, culminating in the investigative judgment. Here's how Seventh-day Adventists explain the process. Christ's ministry in the heavenly sanctuary. After his death and resurrection, Jesus ascended to heaven and began his ministry as our high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. This ministry is believed to be a continuation of the atoning work he accomplished through his sacrifice on the cross. The investigative judgment. In 1844, at the end of the prophetic period of 2,300 days, Christ is said to have entered the second and last phase of his atoning ministry. This phase involves the investigative judgment, which is a review of the lives of all who have ever lived, to determine who among the dead are deemed worthy to take part in the first resurrection and who among the living are prepared for Christ's return. Cleansing with the blood of Jesus. The earthly sanctuary's cleansing on the Day of Atonement involved the blood of animal sacrifices. In contrast, the heavenly sanctuary is purified with the perfect sacrifice of the blood of Jesus. This purification is seen as a spiritual application of the blood of Christ to remove the record of sin from the heavenly sanctuary. Vindication of God's justice. The investigative judgment is believed to vindicate the justice of God in saving those who believe in Jesus. It demonstrates God's fairness in the ultimate disposition of all sin and confirms the loyalty of those who will receive the kingdom. This concept of the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is unique to Seventh-day Adventist theology and is not a physical but a spiritual event.
Is this part of the Seventh-day Adventist gospel? Because remember, if they preach another gospel, I don't know who else's gospel this would be in.
Yes, the concept of the investigative judgment and the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary in 1844 is indeed part of the Seventh-day Adventist gospel. It is integrated into their broader understanding of the plan of salvation and the role of Christ as our high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. This belief is one of the distinctive doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and is considered a key component of their theological framework, particularly their understanding of end-time events and Christ's ongoing atoning work. The Seventh-day Adventist gospel emphasizes the following key points. Salvation by faith in Jesus. Like other Christian denominations, Seventh-day Adventists believe that salvation is a gift from God through faith in Jesus Christ. The role of the law. They maintain that God's law, including the Sabbath, is still relevant for Christians and is a reflection of his character and love. The Great Controversy. They teach about the cosmic conflict between good and evil, known as the Great Controversy, which is central to understanding the world's history and future. The Second Coming of Christ. The imminent return of Jesus Christ is a core belief, and they emphasize living a life in preparation for this event. The investigative judgment and the cleansing of the sanctuary are seen as part of God's final work before the return of Christ, making it an integral aspect of their gospel message. If you have more questions or would like to discuss this further, please let me know.
So, Josh, what do you think about that? They make this an integral part of their gospel message.
Sounds like another gospel to me.
Oh, boy.
And the AI didn't even hesitate. They was like, yes.
Yeah, well, the AI, it's just reading, what Ellen White says, and I had a friend the other day. He's a former third generation Seventh-day Adventist, so he's got 3 generations of his family that grew up in it, and he brought up this book, and this one quote, it does say that that this is part of their gospel, and I was like, whoa, what? Because I was like, man, other people need to hear that, because because I know, like, you and a lot of other people, if you hear someone talking about another gospel, I know you guys are really on that. So that's kind of why I was doing this too, and bringing up that particular detail, because people got to realize that this is part of their gospel message, and we know we're not supposed to preach another gospel. I don't think we're supposed to add anything to it, from the best I can tell.
So they're making the date, the 1840 date, an essential part of the gospel?
Yeah, because it's this investigative judgment that they say started to happen, which is a weird contradiction to Daniel 8, because it says it will take 2,300 evening mornings, then the sanctuary will be properly restored. It doesn't say it will start to be. It doesn't say it will start to be cleansing, or it will start to go through a cleansing process. It says it will be restored. So according to them, it's not even restored. So this prophecy is not even fulfilled. So they have their it didn't even get fulfilled according to them. Yeah, they're so self-defeating. They're so and it's like when you talk to these people, they actually think they got it all figured out, right? More than anyone. And they think, like, they really do think that Ellen White was a legit prophet. That's what blew my mind, because I never talked to anyone like that before, right? And when you first talk to them, they downplay Ellen White. They're like, oh, no. we like some of them will even go as far as to say, oh, I don't know if she's I don't call her a prophet, and they'll do things like that, and I'm like, well, okay, maybe you're not so cultish after all. And when you hear things like, well, we believe in faith through Jesus is what saves, it does. Okay, they have a lot of Christian lingo that makes them sound so Christianized. But then when you start to hear this stuff, and it's like, well, this is part of their gospel, their unique Seventh-day Adventist gospel. And it's like, it's like they're so sly about it. If they would just come right out but see, once you start challenging them on things like, well, how did, because it's like Ellen White said something about like the universe being created before the earth. And you can read, Genesis, and it's like, let me just go to Genesis 1 and just show something real quick. So Genesis 1.
Do they make the earth the center of the universe?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they believe. I don't think they believe in geocentrism. They might have one of these doctrines where they don't really come right out and say it. But when you're reading this, it's like, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering across the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that there was light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness called night. And evening and morning were the first day. And then God said, let there be firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Then God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament for the waters that were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And so the evening and morning were the second day. Now, someone was trying to argue with me that this could possibly be the universe, but the problem is, it's like when it says, then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called sea. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, herb that yields seed, and fruit trees that yield fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb that yields seed according to its kind, according to the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw it was good. So the evening and morning were the third day. And
so is your position that the earth and the universe came into existence at the same time?
Well, I mean, here it basically tells you that that there was just these waters, which I'm not even sure. I mean, maybe it was like the entire universe was nothing but water, because it just says God was hovering over the face of the waters. And it said then God said, let there be light, and there was light, and God saw the light was good. So I don't know what's going on, because right here we know there's no sun, there's no stars. It seems like it's just water, right? I mean, I don't see anything else but water, and there's light, and there's a period of light and a period of darkness. And then so that's like the first day. And then the second day, there's this firmament in the midst of the waters, and then he divides it, the waters from the water. So it sounds like there's like maybe a ball of water, and then there's like another water. I don't know, but there's like some kind of dividing between it. So there's like a firmament in the midst of two waters. Then God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. I always thought this firmament, unless the firmament might be the earth. I mean, and then maybe the earth has waters within the earth, and then there's waters above the earth, which is like the oceans and lakes. Maybe that's what it's talking about. So that could be what the firmament is. A lot of people always told me that was like the heavens or something. Maybe I should look that up in the interlinear real quick just to see what that could be. So interlinear, Genesis 1. But I do got someplace I'm going here with this, people, so just kind of be patient. So Raka, so what's Raka mean? Extended surface and expanse. So it says, and it says 16 times it's just an expanse, and one time it's an expanse of heaven. So I'm wondering where else it's got it in the Bible. See, because it could just be an expanse of the earth. It might not. It just could just be a word that means expanse, and then maybe just expanse there. But a lot of times it looks like, well, like in Daniel 12:3, it says, as the brightness of the firmament. So it sounds like it's using firmament like the heavens there. And then in Ezekiel, and above the firmament was over their heads. That sounds like heavens there. So it might just be heavens. So and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening. So I guess it even says it right here. I kind of missed that point. And God called the firmament heaven. So it sounds like, I guess, like the heavens are in between two. I don't know if it's like two spheres of water or what there, but anyway. And then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and gathering together the waters called seas, and saw that it was good. But I guess it's in verse 14. It says, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens. So I guess we got this firmament, but there's nothing out there, is what this sounds like to me. And when she's like in her book, and I can't remember what book this is in. It's on one of Miles's recent videos, answering Adventism's recent videos, where they talk about, I could probably pull it up real quick. I just watched it the other day, and I won't play much of it, but it is a really weird thing she says. Oh, another thing. Oh, I should really. Oops, why did it go here? Oh, what the heck? There we go. So there's a broadcast just a few days ago, and it was really. Oh man, maybe it's past lives, maybe. Oh, creation, right here it is.
I'm going to give away this incredible $4,000. Wait, no, not this one. This
distinguishes him from all other gods. We should worship the God who made us, and not the gods we have made. By virtue of his creatorship, he deserves total allegiance. Any relationship that interferes with this allegiance is idolatry and subject to divine judgment. Thus, faithfulness to the Creator is a life or death matter. Our worship of God is based on the fact that he is our creator and we are his creatures.
Oh, here it is. I think it's back here.
History. It may be innocent to conjecture beyond Bible history if our suppositions do not contradict the facts found in the sacred. Now, she also had this to say, quote, I have been shown that without Bible history, geology can prove nothing. Relics found in the earth do give evidence of a state of things differing in many respects from the present. But the time of their existence and how long a period these things have been in the earth are only to be understood by Bible history. It may be innocent to conjecture beyond Bible history if our suppositions do not contradict the facts found in the sacred scriptures. But when men leave the word of God in regard to the history of creation and seek to account for God's creative works upon natural principles, they are upon a boundless ocean of uncertainty. Just how God accomplished the work of creation in 6 literal days, he has never revealed to mortals. His creative works are just as incomprehensible as his existence. Close quote. So this is to say that it is assumed by her, as well as
you know what's funny, Chris?
For that matter,
What?
that if you disagree with
That
the
right there, Ellen White, which they say that God created the world in 6 literal days, but when it comes to the prophecy in Daniel with the 2,300, suddenly that's should be taken as each day is a year rather than a literal day.
Yeah, yeah, because see, and they use Genesis to go see there's an evening and morning, which is one day, and then they'll jump to, I think it's Numbers or something, where they got that year for a day, or maybe it's Ezekiel, and where there's like some year for a day prophecy, but God tells them right in that text to interpret it that way, and it's
The
like
evening and the night, right?
yeah, I mean, well, in that text, it's a day. Like it's the Hebrew word yom. We don't ever see an evening and a morning for a year prophecy. It's always, which would be Erev and Boker in Hebrew. What we see is every time there's like a prophecy where it's a day for a year in the Bible, God, first of all, he explicitly says it. And second of all, it's always the word yom, which would be transliterated yom, or yamim, yamim, which is just the plural form of yom. So it would just be one of those two words, and it's like, but we don't see that in Daniel 8, but yet they're still doing a day for a year. And even at the bottom of the prophecy of Daniel 8, it's like God doubles down, and he goes in verse 26, and he says, the vision of the evenings and mornings that have been spoken is true. It's almost like he's re-emphasizing that it's really important that there's an evening and a morning to this prophecy. And, when you start to times, what's 2,300 years times 365 days? And then that's how many evening and mornings you have. And that's too many. So it's like, I think it's like, what is it? Like, might be 800,000. Is it 1,600 and 1,600,000 or something like, I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's some number like that. It's some number around 1 million evenings and mornings, basically. So, and I always kind of find that peculiar, but I wanted to just play this just a little bit more because I finally found the part I wanted.
Plainest precepts of Jehovah are turned from to receive infidel fables.
Oops, let me go back. I think I skipped it.
Let me show you how we do stuff around here. Actually, my department uses Monday.com, so I'm good.
Now, she also had this to say, quote,
I hope not this part.
I have been shown that without Bible history, geology can
right here.
Not starting with scripture, but you're seeking to utilize natural principles alone, which lands one upon boundless oceans of uncertainty. She continues, it has been the special work of Satan to lead fallen man to rebel against God's government, and he has succeeded too well in his efforts. He has tried to obscure the law of God, which in itself is very plain. He has manifested a special hate against the 4th precept of the Decalogue, because it defines the living God, the maker of the heavens and the earth. The plainest precepts of Jehovah are turned from to receive infidel fables. Man will be left without excuse. God has given sufficient evidence upon which to base faith if he wishes to believe. In the last days, the earth will be almost destitute of true faith. Upon the mere pretense, or merest pretense, the word of God will be considered unreliable, while human reasoning will be received, though it be in opposition to plain scripture facts. Men will endeavor to explain from natural causes the work of creation, which God has never revealed. But human science cannot search out the secrets of the God of heaven and explain the stupendous works of creation, which were a miracle of...
Oops, this still wasn't it. There's just a little bit more. Oh, what are the heavens? Sorry, everyone. So it says, what are the heavens? Some people are puzzled, and understandably so, by the verses that say God created the heavens and the earth. And it quotes these verses. And that he made the sun, the moon, the stars, and on the fourth day of the creation week 6,000 years ago. Now, here's the kicker. Were all heavenly bodies brought into existence at that time? Creation week did not involve the heaven that God has dwelt in from eternity. The heavens in Genesis 1 and 2 probably refer to our sun and its system of planets. Indeed, the earth, instead of being Christ's first creation, was most likely his last one. The Bible pictures the sons of God, probably the atoms of all the unfallen worlds, meeting with God, and she cites
From the exposition
and they cite
of their own beliefs.
oops, sorry.
They
And
just don't like. They just don't like. How are they gonna say the earth was probably the last thing that God created? And literally, verse 1 says, "In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth." So it's like the tail end of the beginning. Is that what they're arguing?
Yeah, that's what it looks like it's saying. Like, okay, like I can understand, because that very first verse in Genesis, God, in the beginning, God's created the heavens and the earth. So God's just telling you how he's going to create, that he's creating everything. And then it starts to tell you how and when, the sequence right after that first verse. But the problem falls where she says the creation week did not involve. Well, this is in the Seventh Day Adventists believe, chapter 6, creation, and it says creation week did not involve the heaven that God has dwelt in from eternity. The heavens in Genesis 1 and 2 probably refer to our sun and its system of planets. Indeed, the earth, instead of being Christ's first creation, was most likely his last one. The Bible pictures the sons of God, probably the atoms of all the unfallen worlds, meeting with God, and they cite Job 1 verses 6 through 12. So far, space probes have discovered no other inhabited planets. So it looks like they're kind of speaking against themselves by their own thing, but then they go on to say they apparently are situated in the vastness of space, well beyond the reach of our sin-polluted solar system, quarantined against the infection of sin. But just the fact that they teach that we're not the only things created, there's other atoms out there, and unfallen worlds out there meeting with God. And Miles goes on to say, because I guess part of the theme of the great controversy is that it's how do they quite describe it? It's like it's supposed to be like some kind of thing going on with God and Satan, and trying to prove that God's law is good, and so earth was created, and this is going to be the I guess where all this plays out at. And I can't remember all the particulars. I just think it's kind of crazy that the Bible basically tells you that the lights in the heavens were created on the fourth day. The earth was created, what was it, the second day, I think, or the third day? Yeah, the third day. So the earth was created on the third day, at least like all the dry land. So, and then you got on the fourth day, the heavens, and I would think all those planets you see up there that we see light reflecting off of, and the stars and everything, I would consider that the universe. And so I don't see how the universe can be created before the earth. Like, to me, that's like a complete contradiction. But I mean, I guess they're going to probably go on to argue that no, Ellen's got to be right if she thinks there's like other there's life way out there. But I thought like all the stars seem to be created, and I don't see how these other planets are living without stars. So, and it looks like the stars are created, the lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light on the earth. And it was so it seems like any kind of stars we see up in the sky is for light on the earth. And so I think that's another clear contradiction by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So, I want to see like how did the sanctuary get dirty? How did the heavenly sanctuary get dirty? How do Seventh-day Adventists say that the heavenly sanctuary got polluted or whatever that needs to happen, where it needs to be cleansed? So I guess what happened to the heavenly sanctuary that requires it to need to be cleansed, and how does that cleansing finally happen?
Seventh-day Adventists believe that the heavenly sanctuary requires cleansing, analogous to the earthly sanctuary described in the Old Testament. This belief is rooted in their interpretation of the biblical Day of Atonement, which involved a cleansing ritual for the earthly sanctuary to remove the record of the sins of the Israelites that had accumulated over the past year. Here's how they explain the need for cleansing and how it happens. Accumulation of sin records. According to Seventh-day Adventist doctrine, when individuals confess their sins, those sins are forgiven through Christ's atoning sacrifice. However, the record of these sins remains in the heavenly sanctuary. Over time, this leads to a figurative pollution of the sanctuary as the records of all humanity's sins accumulate there. The investigative judgment. Starting in 1844, which marks the end of the prophetic 2,300 days mentioned in Daniel 8 verse 14, Seventh-day Adventists believe that Jesus began the investigative judgment phase of his ministry in the heavenly sanctuary. This judgment involves examining the records of sins to determine who among the dead and living have remained faithful to God. Cleansing with Christ's blood. The cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is believed to be carried out not with the blood of animal sacrifices, as was done in the earthly sanctuary, but with the perfect sacrifice of the blood of Jesus. This act is seen as a spiritual application that removes the record of sins from the heavenly sanctuary. Vindication of God's justice. The investigative judgment and the subsequent cleansing of the sanctuary serve to vindicate the justice of God. It demonstrates his fairness in the ultimate disposition of sin and confirms the loyalty of those who will receive the kingdom. This process of cleansing is a unique aspect of Seventh-day Adventist eschatology and is considered a crucial part of their understanding of the final events leading up to the second coming of Christ.
In Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, doesn't it say that after the 2300 is complete, that the sanctuary is cleansed? Because I could have swore it says, and then it will be cleansed, or then it will be restored, which seems to imply that this is a completed action, not that it's an ongoing action. So shouldn't this have already been cleansed in 1844?
The text of Daniel 8 verse 14 indeed states that after the 2,300 days, the sanctuary will be cleansed or restored. The verse is often translated as, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored," or, "And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." This has been interpreted to mean that the action of cleansing the sanctuary is a completed event that occurs at the end of the 2,300 days. Seventh-day Adventists interpret the 2,300 days as prophetic days, representing 2,300 years, which they believe concluded in 1844. They understand the cleansing of the sanctuary to refer to the beginning of the investigative judgment in heaven, where Christ enters the most holy place to intercede on behalf of humanity and to cleanse the heavenly sanctuary of the records of sin. The phrase, "Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed," is seen by Seventh-day Adventists not as a single moment in time, but as the start of a process, the investigative judgment, that began in 1844 and continues until the second coming of Christ. This judgment process is believed to involve a review of the lives of all who have ever lived, to determine who among the dead are deemed worthy to take part in the first resurrection, and who among the living are prepared for Christ's return. While the initiation of the cleansing is seen as a completed action that started in 1844, the process itself is ongoing and will be completed at the end of time, according to Seventh-day Adventist eschatology. This interpretation is unique to their theology and reflects their understanding of the atonement and the final judgment.
How is this a completed action if it's the initiation of the cleansing? Because I'm seeing a contradiction with that last paragraph you read to me, because you say, while the initiation of the cleansing is seen as a completed action that started in 1844, the process itself is ongoing. So that looks to me like a contradiction. This is so much faster. This would take several shows to have an SDA answer this.
I understand the confusion, and I'll clarify the Seventh-day Adventist perspective on this matter. The phrase, "Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed," as interpreted by Seventh-day Adventists, refers to the beginning of a specific phase in Christ's ministry in the heavenly sanctuary, which they believe started in 1844 at the end of the prophetic period of 2,300 years. This phase is the investigative judgment. The contradiction you're noticing arises from the difference between the initiation of an action and the completion of a process. Initiation. The initiation of the cleansing of the sanctuary is seen as a completed action in the sense that it began at a specific point in time, 1844. This is when Christ is believed to have entered the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to start the investigative judgment. Ongoing process. The process of cleansing the sanctuary is ongoing because it involves the review of the lives of all believers, which continues until the second coming of Christ. This process is not instantaneous, but unfolds over time. So, while the start of the investigative judgment, the initiation of the cleansing, occurred in 1844 and is a past event, the judgment itself, the process of cleansing, is ongoing and will be completed at a future time. In this context, the term cleansing refers to both the initiation of the judgment and the ongoing work of Christ as our high priest, which includes the application of his atoning sacrifice to the lives of believers and the removal of the record of sins from the heavenly sanctuary. The Seventh-day Adventist interpretation holds that the prophecy in Daniel 8 verse 14 was fulfilled in 1844 with the beginning of this judgment phase. But the full and complete cleansing of the sanctuary will only be realized when Christ finishes.
Okay, so it's not cleansed. So, I mean, to me, this just seems silly to keep holding on to this. We see that how much they have stretched the text. So here's one more. I'll throw this one out there for it. I'm also a little skeptical of their so-called Karaite calendar, because I don't know of any Jewish group that has Passover in the month of May in consecutive years, yet they found some group that is said to have done such a thing, yet I cannot find any Karaite that backs up this claim that there was ever a period of time when they were celebrating Passover consecutively in the month of May. And so, can you find me any source of any Karaite that will back them up on this claim that might be around today or throughout history? Because I'm looking for it and I can't seem to find it. And if I can't find it, then that puts even more doubt on their Day of Atonement date in October 22nd, because I would be very skeptical of a calendar that no one else will affirm, especially when I see no one else having Passovers as late as mid-May, like they had one on their supposed Karaite calendar in 1843.
The Karaite Jewish community has a unique approach to determining the dates for Passover and other festivals, which is based on the observation of the barley harvest and the new moon rather than the fixed rabbinical calendar. The Karaite method can lead to variations in the date of Passover from year to year, and it is possible for Passover to occur in late April or even May, depending on the agricultural conditions and lunar sightings. However, finding specific historical records of the Karaite calendar that would confirm Passover being celebrated in May in consecutive years, particularly around the 1840s, is challenging.
Okay.
Karaite Jews have historically been a small minority within the Jewish community, and their practices have not always been well documented or widely recognized outside their own community. The Karaite Jews of America provide resources and information about their traditions and practices, including the celebration of Passover, but they may not have detailed historical records readily available online.
I'm just looking for a single Karaite. It doesn't even have to be in the 1840s, but any time in history that had Passover occur in back-to-back years in May. Is there one single Karaite on this entire planet that will affirm this? So I mean, we're real desperate. We're just looking for any Karaite at all. Just one, like even if he's just some weird guy living in a basement. We'll take anything.
Finding specific historical records from the Karaite Jewish community that detail the exact dates of Passover celebrations, especially for back-to-back years in May, is quite challenging. The Karaite method of determining the calendar is based on the observation of the barley harvest and the new moon, which can lead to variations in the date of Passover from year to year. This method is different from the fixed rabbinical calendar and can result in Passover falling in late April or even May, depending on the year.
Well, I've never
However,
seen
the
May.
Karaite Jews of America provide resources and information about their traditions
They
and
keep
practices.
saying it can fall May. I have yet to see them except for that one first year that they did a barley harvest survey back in 1999. That was the very first year they did it, and it was late. But a lot of people say because that was their first time they ever did it, that they didn't know what they were doing. And that's a good argument. That was their very first year they did it, and they pushed it that far out. So, let's see here. What I want to basically ask them. Okay, I got another question. Is there any evidence of any Jew at all, Karaite, or any other group that had Passover on the second new moon after the vernal equinox? Chew and Karaki. Oh boy. Well, it still got it right though.
The determination of the date for Passover in Jewish tradition is based on a lunar calendar, and it typically begins on the night of a full moon after the northern vernal equinox. However, due to leap months falling after the vernal equinox, Passover sometimes starts on the second full moon after the vernal equinox.
I didn't ask for the second.
This can
I
occur
asked
in
for the
years
second
when an
full
extra
moon.
month is added to the Jewish calendar, a leap month, to ensure that Passover does not start before spring, as the Torah commands that Passover should fall during the spring season. The Jewish calendar is designed to keep the festivals in their appropriate seasons, and the addition of a leap month is part of this system. The leap month, known as Adar 2, is added approximately 7 times in a 19-year cycle. This ensures that the lunar calendar stays in sync with the solar year and that the agricultural basis for the festivals, such as the ripening of barley for the Omer offering during Passover, is maintained. While the Karaite Jews...
Okay, so it didn't really understand my question because there's one. Okay, there's about 3 different calendars. There's one that starts it like at the first. They make sure to start at the first full moon after the vernal equinox, and they'll say that's Passover, and that's what like the Catholics normally do, right? Then you got like another group that says, well, we're gonna wait until the first new moon after the vernal equinox to start the month of Aviv. Then you got the other ones that say, well, we're only going to go by the barley harvest, but that full moon has to land after the vernal equinox. So you got 3 different interpretations of to how people normally do this. And but I've never seen one where they ever started the second new moon, start the month of Nisan, the second new moon after the vernal equinox. So I'm going to ask it one more time. Is there any Jewish group that ever started the month of Nisan on the second new moon after the vernal equinox? That's what I'm trying to ask. The month of AVIV or NISAN. Have they ever started that month on the second vernal equinox? I mean, on the second new moon after the vernal equinox, and did that consecutive years? Oops, it didn't have that right, man. I guess I gotta type this out. Okay, hold on. Has any Jewish group ever started the month of NISAN, comma, or AVIV? Here, I'm gonna stop this. Ask it one more time. I guess it had it right here, so it's just not understanding it. Sorry, oops. Let's do it this way. So, has any Jewish group ever started the month of Nisan on the second new moon after the vernal equinox in consecutive years? Because if we can't find this, because there should be someone that does this, that's done it once. There's got to be some sort of recording. And I just don't think it's possible, because you want to make sure it stays.
The Jewish calendar is structured to ensure that the month of Nisan, and thus Passover, falls in the spring season. This is achieved by adding a leap month approximately once every 3 years, which can result in Passover occurring after the second new moon following the vernal equinox in some years. However, this does not typically happen in consecutive years due to the structure of the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar follows a 19-year cycle with 7 leap years, which include an additional month of Adar, Adar 2. This intercalation ensures that the lunar months align with the solar year and that the festivals, including Passover, occur in their appropriate seasons. While the rabbinical Jewish calendar has been fixed since the 4th century CE, the Karaite Jews determine the beginning of the month by the actual sighting of the new moon and the ripeness of the barley crop in Israel. This can lead to variations in the date of Passover, but there is no standard practice of starting Nisan on the second new moon after the vernal equinox in consecutive years. It's important to note that the Karaite method can lead to different dates for Passover compared to the rabbinical calendar, but specific historical records confirming that any Jewish group, including the Karaites, consistently started the month of Nisan.
Okay. Can you show me a record of any Jewish group going by any calendar where they started that month on the second new moon after the vernal equinox in the past 200 years? Because I bet you there's no record of it at all.
The Jewish calendar is designed to keep Passover in the spring, and it typically aligns the month of Nisan with the first new moon after the vernal equinox. However, due to the intercalation of the Jewish calendar, which adds a leap month approximately 7 times in a 19-year cycle, Passover can sometimes occur after the second new moon following the vernal equinox. This adjustment ensures that the lunar months align with the solar year and that the festivals occur in their appropriate seasons. While the fixed rabbinical calendar has been in place since at least the 4th century, the Karaite Jews determine the beginning of the month by the actual sighting of the new moon and the ripeness of the barley crop in Israel. This can lead to variations in the date of Passover, but there is no standard practice of starting Nisan on the second new moon after the vernal equinox in consecutive years. In the past 200 years, there are no widely recognized records of any Jewish group, including the Karaites, consistently starting the month of Nisan on the second new moon after the vernal equinox. The rabbinical calendar, which most of Jewish communities follow, was not designed to place Nisan after the second new moon following the equinox in consecutive years. For more detailed information or historical records, direct inquiries to Jewish organizations or scholars specializing in Jewish history and practices would be necessary. If you have further questions or need assistance with other topics,
Well, that's it. So as you can see, I mean, you can go look it up, people, and I dare you to go find even one time. I'd like to see the calendar where you can find it, where we got a recording of Jews celebrating the month of Nisan, and they're starting at the second new moon after the vernal equinox. I want to see such a calendar. I want to see any Jewish group living today that will lay claim to that calendar. Show me that. That doesn't exist. So all this information I've went on this whole video on and showing you how flaky that interpretation of Daniel 9 is, and how much straw it's built on, and how it just doesn't line up to anything. I don't like, I'm telling you, everything from their Day of Atonement date, that weird calendar with May Passovers, it doesn't make any sense, because if you have a May Passover, what it does is, if it was as late as May 14th, which is that the calendar the Seventh-day Adventists were using, that very next year, you have to you still have to have 12 months in that year. And that's going to force you, in order to have 12 months, you have to have your calendar go all the way into the middle of April. And if it goes all the way into the middle of April, you stand a very good chance of missing an entire harvest for a whole month. That's why I say it does not make any sense to me. And I've seen no record of any Jew ever starting the month of Nisan or Aviv on the second new moon after the vernal equinox. Never seen a record of it, besides what the Seventh-day Adventists claim. But that's it. So,
Chris, I have a question.
Yeah.
So they believe that Christ began the process of sanctifying the heavenly sanctuary through his blood. So let's say we grant them that, right? It kind of sounds like this is a not all-powerful God, right? Because an all-powerful, almighty God can, for lack of a better term, snap his fingers and it's done, right? So I don't understand why it would be a process. Like, what is Jesus doing? Is he going through all the file cabinets and looking at all the like, why is it such a process?
I mean, that's another thing. Yeah, why does it take him so long to pour through these records?
It almost seems like, Christ died, buried, rose again, and he went up to the Father to take his blood. So presenting the blood should have been sufficient enough to cleanse the sanctuary. But now what they're doing is, I feel like they're taking away from God's omnipotence, sovereignty, and his power, to say that it is a process. Like, and then they specifically laid it out where it's taking him some time to do this. Is that it right there?
Yeah,
An
I was
ongoing
bringing that up, man,
process.
because you were starting to make some points, and I was like, I do want to kind of revisit that. Yeah, so, because I was like saying, it seems like there was a contradiction there, and it says the contradiction you're noticing arises from the differences between the initiation of an action and the completion of a process. I might have to go up further. You might also be thinking of something else, but it says the initiation of the cleansing of the sanctuary is seen as a completed action, in the sense that it began at a certain point in time, a specific point in time. This is when Christ is believed to have entered the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to start the investigative judgment. Ongoing process, the process of cleansing the sanctuary is ongoing because it involves the review of all the lives of all the believers, which continues until his second coming. This process is not instantaneous, but unfolds over time. So that's a big question. It's like, why isn't it instantaneous? Why does it need to unfold over time? And if they want to argue, well, it's like everyone's not done living yet. Well, why did he even bother start doing it then? It's or whatever. I don't know what they would argue for. Like, why would you even start this process? Because I always imagine this process might take some time just because you're bringing each individual up there one at a time or something. If it was something like that, but that's not what they indicate. And you would think that would be at some process like this. If this was to happen, you would think it would be at the end, not like, well, Jesus started it 150 years ago and it's still going. It's like, it doesn't even it's kind of confusing.
They're chasing a moving target. Like, you're judging all the people that already died, and then as people continue dying, like you die and then you get in line and then you wait until it's your turn to be judged. It just seems lengthy.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's going to take this long with 1 billion people dying and the earth is multiplying, you know what? That might never get done. Because you got to think, man, what if the Earth's population goes up and it's already taken them this long? It might be a while, man. Because it sounds like he's like carefully going through these and double checking them, and he's so it's like, and then if we get up to what happens if the Earth's population gets up to 20 billion people and you start having I don't know, maybe about so many billions of people dying per year. It's like, he can't keep up anymore. It's like,
do you think they draw a distinction between the judgment seat of Christ and the great white throne judgment?
Hold on, say that one more time.
Do you think they draw a distinction between the judgment seat of Christ and the great white throne judgment? So the judgment seat of Christ would be believers answering to Christ for what they did with their life in Christ, and then the great white throne would be this judgment that the non-believers go to. Because what Christ is really, my understanding of what Christ is doing is he's basically sorting out the sheep and the goat, the sheep to the right, the goat to the left. And the basis for that sorting is whether or not you have put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. So he's not looking at the sin. He's looking at whether or not you have the blood.
Okay, so I think this right here, this is just for believers. This right here is what's going on, because if I understand right, the way the sins get transferred to the heavenly sanctuary's record is through the blood of Jesus. So it's from believers through the blood of Jesus. And I'm not sure what happens to everyone else. Because that's how it was explained to me. But I can ask the AI and make sure I'm right on this. But let's see here. I'm having trouble getting a hold of a Seventh-day Adventist, and I'm wondering if you could help answer a question. And that question is, how does the sin get transferred into the heavenly sanctuary's record?
The concept of sin transfer into the heavenly sanctuary is a unique aspect of Seventh-day Adventist theology. According to their belief, this process is analogous to the Old Testament sanctuary services. In the earthly sanctuary, the blood of the daily sacrifices transferred the sins of penitent Israelites to the sanctuary through the ministration of the priests in the holy place of the tabernacle. This was a symbolic act where the blood, representing the life of the sinner, was carried by the priest into the holy place and sprinkled before the veil, behind which was the ark containing the law that the sinner had transgressed. By this ceremony, the sin was, in figure, transferred to the sanctuary. In the context of the heavenly sanctuary, Adventists believe that Jesus, our high priest, ministers on our behalf in the true sanctuary in heaven. The sins of those who repent are transferred to the heavenly sanctuary through his ministration. This is based on the understanding that the earthly sanctuary and its services were a copy and shadow of the heavenly things, as described in the book of Hebrews. It's important to note that this is a theological interpretation specific to the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
So, yeah. So basically, this is only the believer's sins that are being transferred into the heavenly sanctuary through the blood of Christ. So basically, the heavenly sanctuary is, I mean, if I was to read Daniel 8 and go on by this and saying, well, it looks to me like, how did the heavenly sanctuary get dirty? It was through the blood of Jesus. If I'm putting two and two together, I don't know how you could say his blood's not, because how's it being transferred? Oh, it's being transferred through the blood of the daily sacrifices, which transferred the sins of a penitent Israelite to the sanctuary through the ministration of the priest and the holy place of the tabernacle. So since we know it's by since we are penitent sinners, and that's going through Christ's blood now, it must be Christ's blood that's getting the sanctuary dirty, because it says after 2300 then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. So it's Christ's blood that's dirty in the heavenly sanctuary. And Seventh-day Adventists will kind of recoil a little bit and get a little bit upset, but to me they're making Jesus into the little horn, and that's why some people say it sounds like you're calling Jesus the little horn, and then they'll freak out and lose their minds. But it's like, if you put two and two together, how's the heavenly sanctuary getting defiled, or what's making it dirty where it needs to be cleansed? Well, if you put two and two together, it got, as this just told us, it's getting transferred through the blood of Jesus by penitent sinners. And so now that kind of makes Jesus into the little horn if you actually put two and two together. Then that's why it's like so inconsistent, because it's like they'll say, no, the little horn's the papacy, but yet the little horn, according to Daniel 8, verses 9 through 12, it's the little horn that's defiling the heavenly sanctuary, because it says, and it grew as high as the host of heaven and cast down some of the stars and some of the earth to the ground and trampled it, magnified itself even to the prince of the host. It removed his daily sacrifice. And we know, they love to link Daniel 9 to this prophecy. And if you do, well, when we read Daniel 9, they say, well, that's Jesus in Daniel 9. That's ending the sacrifices in Daniel 9:27, which I agree. But then if you combine it with Daniel 8, now it doesn't make sense, because it's like the little horns removing the daily sacrifice. So to like someone that's trying to follow along, they're thinking, wait a minute, you're saying Jesus is removing the daily sacrifice in Daniel 9:27, and yet the little horn's doing it in Daniel 8, and you're saying they're both connected. And then the 17th Adventists will be like, but no, that's not what's happening. It's Rome. And then they'll take you on like this 2, 3, 4 hour spill, and you'll still never understand how they actually connect it, and it still won't make sense, and they just won't admit that this is just a really horrible interpretation. It's like, that's what it comes down to.
I'm just confused, because what they're saying, that the blood is what transfers the sin and pollutes the heavenly sanctuary, but the blood is what cleanses. So how
Right.
what it's like saying that, I'm using bleach, but the bleach is making it dirtier. It's the cleaning aspect. The cleansing aspect is the blood of Christ. And also, sin was nailed to the cross. So I don't understand how is that, because that was the understanding with the with the animal sacrifices where
Yeah, the earthly. So that's their picture of it's the exact same thing going on with the heavenly. And they believe that once this process is complete, whenever this whole thing ends, that the sins will then be placed onto Satan, and that Satan's the scapegoat. And so at some point Satan receives the sin. So it's almost like Satan is sort of like the savior of heaven in a way, because he takes the sin onto himself and cleanses heaven, because he's, taking the record of sin and taking it upon himself. And I mean, that's almost what it sounds like. But if you word it to them like that, they'll freak out and like, we don't. That's like making Satan the savior, and it's like, what kind of comes across that way? It's just such a convoluted mess, and it's like you would like normally someone would back off if you had like you came up to me or someone else came up to us. And it's like, hey, I got this interpretation, and we start pointing out like 1/20th of this stuff to them, or maybe even just 1/30th of this stuff. And this person would be like, man, okay, I kind of feel embarrassed. I thought I understood something. But it's like this, dude, it's like, there's like at least 30 things about this, and it just doesn't make sense. And yet, this same person is still trying to tell you that this interpretation makes sense. And it's real maddening.
so Christ took all the sin, and then the sins are going to be transferred over to Satan, and then Satan will be
Cast into the lake
the
of
ultimate
fire.
sacrifice, scapegoat.
Yeah, he plays a part in the atonement, I guess. I mean, that's what it sounds like. Well, you know what? When the scapegoat was part of the whole atonement thing too, so it's almost like Satan's playing a part in it. But yeah, he gets the. I don't know whatever happens to the sins of the unbelievers. I guess they just get thrown into hell. I mean, so I guess that's how their sins just stay upon them. They never got transferred to the heavenly sanctuary, so they get thrown in hell. And then it's all the sins of the believers are transferred to the heavenly sanctuary, and then they're placed on Satan, and then Satan's thrown into hell. So I guess that's how that would work if I'm following that right. Not that I ever heard that from them, but I mean, I'm just assuming if I'm trying to make sense of it all, that's how it would work.
Yeah, they definitely got some answers they need to be providing, but like you said, like there's some of these people, it's just hard to get a straight answer from them, man. I feel the same way with the Calvinists. Like,
Yeah, oh yeah, that's exactly what it reminds me of. It's like earlier when I was talking to this, they might as well have been saying, well, compatibilism.
yeah, it's just like you can't get a straight answer like ever.
Yeah, and to be honest, man, it really is the exact same way, especially like because I think Seventh-day Adventists kind of lead people on a little bit more. Like they're gonna give you an answer, and it's like, and yeah, man, it's just real convoluted, and like you said, they never give you a straight answer. And
You
you start to realize, man, how a cult mind works. Like you engage with Calvinists, you start engaging with Seventh-day Adventists on this stuff, and you start engaging other people that you think seemed a little bit cultish, and you'll start to notice almost the exact same patterns.
It's like they're afraid that once they give us their actual answer, we're gonna see right through them, And honestly, I would have more respect for someone who was just straight up. Like, if they were just straight up and they were just like, yeah, the sin is transferred onto Satan, and then Satan is cast into the lake of fire. That's exactly what we're saying. Okay, good. I disagree, but at least you're giving me a straight answer.
So undevelopment team says the blood covers the altar, and thus a covering of sins. Jesus' blood covers our sins once and for all, because it's forever in the new Holy of Holy. Because he was talking about how like the animal sacrifices never remove sin, but only cover their sins for another year. Yeah, I think that's why they had to do almost daily sacrifices twice a year to show that it to represent that it's taking continual bloodshed. Just like in Revelations when it says the wicked shall have no rest day or night, and we know that means eternity, never ending. Like that's like a mirrorism for it's like continual. And so that's kind of what the same thing was going on here with the sacrifice system. It's like they had to do it morning, day, and night, every day, every year. It never stopped.
It just seems like they don't have a good criteria for determining when to apply the earthly things to the heavenly things, because there's a distinction between the blood of animals versus the blood of Christ. We understand that what the blood of Christ accomplished, the blood of animals never could. So if that's the understanding going into it, then why would you believe that in heaven it's also an ongoing process? Why would you take a cookie cutter approach and say, well, that's how it was on earth, so that's how it must be in heaven? I just don't think they have a legitimate criteria for making that comparison.
Yeah, this guy Adrian Mason, he just recently came out of Seventh-day Adventism, and he says Ellen and Uriah Smith don't believe that Jesus atoned at all, but purchased the right to transfer sins to heaven and then to the devil. So sad.
So yeah, I mean, so that's what I'm saying. Like, just that it's funny that like a former 7-day Adventist can give the straight answer, but when you ask the 7-day Adventist, like they'll tiptoe around the whole idea.
Oh, they'll always, and they'll say, well, this guy never understood Seventh-day Adventism, and that's why he left. He sounds familiar with like Calvinism and everything else. It's like, oh, you didn't understand, and that's why you left, or you didn't. It's like it's the same like sort of attacks that you hear Calvinists aim at Leighton Flowers, and it's like the Seventh-day Adventists like do it to everyone who leaves Seventh-day Adventism.
And pardon my ignorance here, but who are the Latter-day Saints? Are they someone else?
Are they the Mormons? I think. I mean, I always get those confused. I think it's the Mormons. Who are the Latter-day Saints? Are those the Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses? I think it's the Mormons. Or maybe they're a different group. They might be like a branch of... Okay,
You are
Mormons.
correct. The Latter-day Saints refer to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormons. This religious group was founded in the United States in 1830 by Joseph Smith and is known for its unique scriptures, including the Book of Mormon. The term Mormon comes from this book, and while it is often used to refer to members of the church...
Okay. So there you go.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I get it now.
And all those groups came around at the same time, too. It's like those three groups. And I have wondered before, when I read Revelation, is that the three unclean frogs or whatever in Revelation?
You're talking about the Mormons, the Jehovah's
Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists. They all came right at the same time.
Seems like they were competing.
And they got a spirit about them. They really do, man. Like if you it's like it's almost like the same like sort of pathology about them, and it's like I don't know. I almost feel like it's almost like you're like being beheld by a spirit, because it's like you can't show them facts, and it seems like facts don't shake them. Because someone shows me something, it's like, I mean, I'm going to change my beliefs if it doesn't look right. I'm like, oh, I'm not beholden to any church. But it's like them. It's like a lot of times you can. I know at least with the Seventh-day Adventists, I can show them things that just don't make any sense. Like we just showed tonight, and it's like, okay, like this stuff doesn't make any sense, and you're going to still hold on to it. And at that point, I feel like when I interact with these people, it's almost like a spirit's holding them back, where it's like, and they just can't let go. So that's why I did kind of wonder if there was something in Revelation that could be applied, but because I'm just like, man, it just really, it just happens to be three, and it talks about like three unclean spirits or something like that. I can't remember the verse. I think it's like three frogs or something.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I mean, these things come in groups. It's not just one, and like when the Church of Scientology, like you might be able to even look at what other religious groups also sparked around that same time. What, because we have it with the Catholics, where they had the Great Schism, and then out of it, it broke off into Orthodoxy and Eastern Orthodoxy, and it's these things seem to come in groups.
Yeah, speaking of that, man, I talked to Eastern Orthodox person. I might post this clip of the video because I was in a comment section, and so they brought up it was something they brought up about I can't remember the subject they were talking about, but as I was listening to it, they brought up praying to the saints, and I was like, it doesn't make sense to pray to the saints. And I showed them the part about or I said, are they given like some kind of special powers? Like, how can one person hear the prayers of millions of people at once and understand what they're saying? So should we even be praying to them? And especially Mary, there must be probably at least 1 million people praying to her at one time, 24/7. And you got to think, if she's in heaven hearing all of this, and she's going like, my cat Snuffles got sick, and Mary, can you please? And she starts hearing millions of these voices all at once, just like sounding like an ocean, Oh, Mary, help my kid, and you're just hearing like, please pray for Biden, and she's just hearing all of this, and it's just like millions of voices 24/7, and you're praying to her. And like, I mean, really, does that really even make sense? If she's not like some kind of deity, does this even make sense? Do saints become a deity? And I was making argument, like, throwing out comments like that, and the only thing he would do is it almost reminded me of like a Seventh-day Adventist tactic, where it's like, well, look, it does say that the saints in heaven will be praying. They're not dead. I never even brought up the fact that I thought they were in a grave or something. I said, I don't believe in soul sleep or anything. I never brought that up. I just brought up the fact that how can they hear millions of people praying to them at once? And he just kept running around it, man. And it just, I noticed like a lot of these groups, man, it's like always the same sorts of tactics, and I'm starting to pick up on that. But I was kind of like stupid about a lot of things 3 years ago. It's only been like the past 3 years where I grabbed up the Bible and started studying a lot more, because I was like, at first I didn't think I could understand it, because I asked questions in the church, grew up in an age with no internet, for like half my life. And when you would used to, you couldn't look at anything online. So it's like, what book would I even begin to look at for an answer, and all this other stuff? So if I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense to me, and it's like, basically I go to my pastor, then it's like you have to wait until you got a free moment to go over someone else's house to study for them. And that's like a tedious way to learn the Bible. And then after a long enough time, when they're reading one thing, you got a group in the same church telling you, oh yeah, we see that. And I'm sitting there like, I don't see it. Maybe and then you hear people saying, well, some people are given the gift to understand and preach. And I'm like, well, maybe I don't have these gifts, because I keep reading this Bible and I'm not seeing the same things these people are seeing. I'll just chuck that thing to the side, right? And just kind of go about my life. So it's only been like the past 3 years where I started figuring out like, oh, these people actually don't know what they're talking about, and I started looking at it more.
Go to Revelations. What is this guy, Adrian Mason? He said Revelation 16:12. I think that's talking about the three unclean spirits, or the connection
Yeah,
that
I
you.
mean, I was just kind of throwing that out, just more like a comment, not like I was actually serious, but there was, I'll just say, but part of me did wonder. So it says Revelation, what verse was that? 16:12. I'm in the right chapter. Yeah, okay. And the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river of Euphrates, and its water was dried up and prepared the way for the kings of the east. And I saw 3 unclean spirits that looked like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. These are demonic spirits that perform signs and go out to all the kings of the earth to assemble them for battle on the great day of God Almighty. Oh, they probably wouldn't have. I doubt these 3 groups are gonna come to assemble for battle because they're pretty scared. They don't, they're scared to show up on a debate show. So
I mean, you're thinking the right way though. I mean, like, these 3 groups, they kind of spawned out of nowhere around the same time, and they're all got these wacky doctrines. I mean, I think it's a good connection. I mean, maybe we can't prove it 100%, but like I think it's something to contrast. Like I said, usually these things come in groups. It's not just like individualized heresy. It's they. And I think, like I said, I believe they might be feeding off of each other, because what happens is, like, right, you have, I'm not sure the sequence which one came first, but let's say you have the 7-day Adventist, right, and they're starting to pick up speed, and then this guy is like, oh, okay, well, let me do the same thing, and then now you got the Mormons, and now they're picking up speed, and now you have the Jehovah's Witness, like, well, let me get in on the fun too. And it's kind of like the same type of behavior with these charismatic churches, where it's like people see an opportunity for exploitation and they jump on it.
yeah, see, again, right here, they say like the Seventh-day Adventist Church is like trying to fight like against the Pope and everything, but I think when that vax came out in 2020, and it's like you had Jesuit Tony Fauci, Jesuit Trump, and so you would think, so this church is just screaming, Jesuits, 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 we're so scared, we're so scared. And then you got all the Catholic publications bragging about how they have a 200-year history of rewards and punishments for people who don't take a vaccine, and they're bragging about it in 2021 because it's all over different online Catholic publications. And then so my friend found this comment in a comment section on a Glenn Beck video, and he screenshotted it for me. And then, so the Seventh-day Adventist is saying, my wife's college had a huge section of their graduation ceremony dedicated to the Juneteenth agenda. It's a private Seventh-day Adventist college that tried to deny my wife the ability to finish her education because she will not be vaccinated. So, they're just going right along with it, and it's like, because they had a vaccine conference at their church on the Sabbath, endorsed by their Advent Health Network and the General Conference. So when people think like this church, oh, they're so against everything. No, they're not. They're going right along with it. And any church that should have pushed back on it should have been a church with a medical staff, with a medical network. So they should have been able to look all into this and have all the knowledge in the world. More knowledge than me, and I've showed plenty of proof about this, about this whole thing going on, right? And they should have had even more proof and even more access, because they're talking to the government. They're talking to actual medical people that wouldn't get on the phone with me, but they got access to them, because obviously if you're going to be passing this out at your church, you're probably talking right with the government. You're talking to all the people with it, so you can have all the data, and they're going right along with it. And it's like, and they're supposed to be like, well, the government's supposed to hate us, and America's the beast of Revelation, because they believe America is the second beast of Revelation. But here they are partnering with a country that's ran by Roman Catholics, like the CDC director at the time is a Roman Catholic. Tony Fauci's a Roman Catholic. The CEOs of Moderna's Roman Catholic, and you're getting money from the government to do this at your church on the Sabbath. And so it's kind of weird, Seventh-day Adventists, that you're partnering with the government that you say is the beast of Revelation, pushing this thing that seemed to lock down the entire world. It's like, wake up. Like that one gets me, man. Okay, Eric, you say not all Adventists were into the vaccine. Look up Conrad Vine and Villa SDA Church and their vaccine stuff. Okay, but the thing is, the main people who are behind it, who run your SDA church, the General Conference and the Advent Health Network, that's a big chunk of you're the president of the SDA church being behind this. So I mean, you got to kind of think about that. Like, these people, like, okay, why isn't the I don't know, Adventist Defense League speaking up about this? It's like, so why isn't your guys calling each other out? Like, what about School for Prophets, that Seventh-day Adventist? Why is mouth all zipped up? Oh, you make all these videos about end times and stuff. Well, why aren't you calling these people out? Walter Vaith, I mean, I don't know. It's like I haven't really kept up with them, but I didn't notice them calling this stuff out, Well, maybe they did and I missed something, but I didn't notice it. It seemed like they're pretty lax. I'd definitely be like, hey, Shiloh Adventist Church in Florida is hosting this conference on the Sabbath. So better not be a lie, because now you're doing it on the Sabbath and you're if you want to say something, go ahead, man. I don't mean to.
No, yeah, I just don't think that's a good argument to say, like, oh, well, not all 7-day Adventists like agree with that, because I mean, take for example, like the Roman Catholic Church, right?
Oh, good point.
Like the Roman Catholic Church, they're like, it almost seems like they're promoting like homosexuality, like it's okay to be gay and a priest will marry you. But within the Catholic Church, you have individual Catholics who don't necessarily agree with that. But what you really need to look at is who are the representatives and what do they believe, and then that's what what I'm hoping it would do is it would get those 7-day Adventists, the ones who don't agree, to either start rebuking them or to finally decide to part ways. One or the other. Like, you're either going to stand up and speak up, or you're going to part ways with the 7-day Adventist group. Like, if you're part of a group and now the group is suddenly doing something that you don't agree with, then why would you continue to be part of that group?
He says, I'm just saying, because you said SDAs were going along with it, Adventists were not and can't be faulted for what others did. But the heads of your churches did. I mean, like, the majority of them did. I'd like to see all the videos of people calling out the Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church, calling out the SDA General Conference. And I mean, let's just face it, the majority of Seventh-day Adventists are going along with it, or else these people wouldn't be able to keep their presidency, right? Wouldn't you just, like, if the majority of you guys weren't going along with it, all of a sudden funding gets cut because you just are like, hey, I'm not going to come to church until you stop this, right? Right. I mean, you guys do got backbones, right? But then I can't hardly get anyone to debate me live or anything. But that's why I'm saying, it's like I feel like it's got to be the majority of you, just like it's the majority of Catholics. Because if the majority of Catholics were against something, the Pope would have no choice but to have to reverse course on a lot of things, instead of keeping his agenda going forward, and all the Catholic cardinals and everything. It's like if all the Catholics were against it, all it takes is all those Catholics not to donate money for a few months and see what happens, see how fast course gets changed. You guys can do something. So you say the church employees were pressured to get vaccinated. I agree, but many fought against it. But but I'm just saying, there might have been many, but it's not like most. It's like a small percent, right? Because if it was many, if the SDA church was generally good, it wouldn't happen. they would have their funds dropped. Well, I think it's doctrinally relevant because now you guys are your general conference is endorsing, promoting what looks to me to be a lie on the Sabbath, by hooking up with the beast. And you guys are the ones who said it's the beast. Now, if the president of your Seventh-day organization is going along with the beast, because you're the ones who called the United States government the beast of Revelation, the second beast of Revelation, and now you're working with them hand in hand, also with the Jesuits, who you also say are part of the Antichrist. So it's like the second beast of Revelation and the Antichrist, and you're holding hands with them, promoting their agenda. Because this thing is completely Catholic, right? I mean, just in case someone's never been on my show and never saw this, I'll pull up this from 2021. Look at that. And this is Crux. So it's a Catholic magazine. I can find other ones too, but this is just one of them. And here they go. They're bragging about it. And so what I think is your general conference is your church in general is basically like, oh, how can I be like my mother, my harlot mother? Because I think the Catholic Church is the great whore of Revelation. And you guys do too, because I've heard you guys say it before. And so you're like, how can I be like my mommy, my whore mommy? Oh, you guys punish people for taking this? We're going to punish people too, just like in that one thing right here, wherever it was, right here. Oh, that's what you guys do. We'll do it too, mommy. We're going to punish people. And so you guys don't get education, right? So I just think you guys go right by what your mother does. So, I mean, I'm glad you never got vaccinated, Eric, and that's really great. Hopefully you never wore a mask, and hopefully you were, just going nuts on your president. But I mean, I just face facts, man. Like, I mean, this is your education, which most, a lot of Seventh-day Adventists go through these educational institutes, and they're the ones pushing this pretty hard when they're saying, oh, you don't get to finish college if you don't take this. This sounds so much like the mother church, right? I mean, it's punishment. So I don't know, man. It's and then you just look at all that other stuff we brought up tonight. I just I would just have a lot of questions,
Yeah, it's just, they're just deflecting too, because like we're pointing out some like flaw in their logical consistency within the SDA, and now he wants to move the goalposts and say, well, what does this even have to do with doctrine? It's like, well, we've been talking about the doctrine for the last hour, 2 hour and a half, and now suddenly, like, they want to shift gears when we, start talking about the culture within the SDAs.
So you had the Jesuit Review even saying this. Yeah, that's one of our guys. I mean, it's like, come on, man. I mean, like, I honestly think if this was really the church of the end time, it really had the so-called spirit of prophecy, right? That you guys should have saw this coming. Like your upper members wouldn't be like this, wouldn't be going along. This was like the time for you guys to really be like, hey, we're gonna really prove that, we really are the remnant by forcing everyone to go along with the agenda. So I think you guys really dropped the ball, and I personally don't think you dropped the ball. I just think the mask came off. It's what it is, and it got revealed, and people are fighting it. But when you look at all those other doctrines, I don't even see how you can defend those doctrines. So yeah, I think that's just a really tough thing to defend. So Undevelopment Team says, I have an autoimmune disorder and hope we never meet because I question if you ever in shower. It's okay, man. Nah, dude. Back in 2017, I predicted that this was going to happen. If I did not have my channel taken down so many times, show you guys something real quick. because I'm gonna probably cut out pretty soon, but I want to show something I posted recently, and this was just a screenshot off of one channel of mine, because I noticed some of my videos were taken down, and well, they were put on private, and then I noticed other ones were missing, so I decided to take screenshots just to show people. This is four. So right here's 4 videos. Here's another 2 that were actually, I think I got to reduce the size because I think it's more than that. So I reduce the size of these images. Oops, I guess I can't do it on here. On the phone I can do it, and if I reduced it, you would see a couple more blocked videos. But look at all these blocked videos I got. And this is just off of one channel, and we already seen about 11 videos blocked there. And I didn't even screen capture all of them. So, and this is my, like, what is this? Like my 13th channel I've had in the past 4 years. Because my first channel, it's like I did have a prediction. I said in 2017, when Trump started nominating all these people, and I saw that they were Roman Catholics that had basically helped Clinton get off the hook, like William Barr back in the 90s, around 1992. George Bush and Bill Clinton ran against each other in an election, and they were talking about the Mena, Arkansas drugs being run in and out of it. And so the press comes up to Bush and it's like, "Are you going to investigate him?" And Bush is like, "Yeah, if I'm president, I'll try to investigate Clinton." And then some of the other people were like, Clinton, if you're elected, are you going to investigate Bush and the drug running he's going on?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll go try to investigate." He's like, when he got elected, he winds up spending only like $50,000 to investigate, and it was, most people thought he didn't even bother really even trying. He just wanted to make it look like he tried. And it basically goes to but William Barr had a chance to put them both in jail, and I honestly think George Bush Sr. and Clinton should have been in jail. And but William Barr says, "Well, since it's a presidential election, I don't want to interfere." And then he just winds up doing nothing even after the election, right? So now when I see Trump nominating these same people that let him off the hook, and they're Roman Catholics, and I see how the Roman Catholics want the border left open, they're for gun control, they're promoting limiting free speech on online platforms, because you had Chelsea Clinton saying, "Hey, we should have more, we should do more to restrict free speech." And you watched her give that speech at the Vatican Council for Culture, and they're all clapping, all happy about it. And it's like, so when I saw Trump nominating these types of people, I was like, uh-oh, we're in for something horrible. They're setting us up for something. And I had videos, from 2017 on, and where I was actually sick to my stomach because I felt like no one could see this coming, and everyone kept cheering for him. And I'm just watching him nominate people like Gina Haspel, who was was like torturing people, that basically lied us into Afghanistan, because she goes torture these people, gives them false information, and uses these lies to get us into that Afghanistan war. And then you got Brett Kavanaugh that sabotaged the Vince Foster investigation, and he was involved in something else. But then even besides all that, even want to say, "Well, Chris, that's conspiracy stuff." But even before he's elected, he's like talking about global warming and how we got to do something about it. And I'm like, and this is supposed to be like the so-called conservatives that are going to do this country right, that Trump's putting in. So to me, when they're acting like, "Oh, Trump's such this big bad guy that's going to just really, do these Democrats in," I'm like looking at all this, and I'm like, dude, we are being set up. And that's what I kept talking about. And then 2020 happens. So no, I don't. So that's, sorry, long story, but that's why I don't believe in all this stuff, because I felt like I saw it coming. It's like I saw it coming. And then I finally see it actually happen in 2020. And it's like, I don't go along with this stuff. And plus, no one cared about me when I was forced to work and everyone else gets paid to stay at home. I never even got hero pay. And you would think if this was a real thing, that people would have a heart and would have been like, oh yeah, here's some money, man. You're risking your life because you're the one actually out there working. Why should we be driving up inflation by staying at home receiving checks while you're out there having to pay this inflation? And we're forcing you to work. You should get something. No, I get nothing, right? And neither did any of the other people. Like you got people working in gas stations dealing with hundreds of customers a day because they don't have nowhere else to go because they shut everything down. So everyone's cramming into these gas stations. And then someone's going to tell me about autoimmune stuff and all this. No, get out of here, man, because no one cared about these other people. And it's like, if they really were this scared, okay, force everything to lock down for 2 weeks and just say no one can go to work, no one can do anything. It's too dangerous. It's too scary. But I just think it's a bunch of nonsense. And I don't know. My kids during the pandemic, they were playing in the floors of stores, and one of my sons was making snow angels in the dirt. And I mean, he's alive. I'm alive. But you know what? I got 2 family members. One's dead, and one's still got the effects of taking this magic cure, right? And so it's like I don't go along with any of this stuff. I don't believe in it. It's a bunch of nonsense. It didn't do us any good, because look at the inflation. I mean, does anyone really like I mean, right now I have to move out of my house. I make decent money right now. I still have to leave my house. I can't afford it. It's like my all my utility bills have went up through the roof. My rent is just crazy outrageous. We gotta get rid of everything. We gotta get rid of at least, I'd say we gotta get rid of at least 90% of our stuff and move out of this house. And it's like, I definitely don't want to move. If there was any way I could stay here, I just can't afford it. Everything's just going through the roof, and it's all because it started then, and now that inflation's catching up to us. So, yeah. Hey, Sherry. Yeah, 2 heads of the same snake. I mean, they can, though. I tried to run for office. The sad thing was, I don't feel like I got enough support, and leading up to it. But I mean, I got on the Republican ticket as a U.S. House Representatives, right? This thing, it's not like people can't get on these tickets. It's not like someone's sitting there like, oh, I can't even get on, can't even run. It's that no one gets involved until you got to do it before the primary. You can't wait till the primary to vote, and I vote in the primaries. No, it's going to take getting the right people on the primary ticket, because you can't even worry about the Democrat ticket. You got to treat the Republican ticket like it is the election, and you got to worry about getting those people on. And if you can get the right Republican on that ticket, then that a lot of people are like a monkey, and they're just going to pull the lever just because it says Republican. So 40% of your battle is gone, maybe even more than that. And then all you got to do is just convince a few people vote for me, right? Because 40% of them at least are just going to pull that handle, mindlessly. They don't care. They just like, this is my party. But oh yeah, forcing people to consume less, definitely. That's what I feel like, man. It's like, when I go to the stores, I don't know how it is where you all live at, but when I go to the stores, it's like I'm noticing like certain items I can't even get a hold of. Okay, so one thing is those Arizona energy drinks in a yellow can. Now I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure out ways to cut costs, but I still like drinking energy drinks. And I guess everyone now has the same idea where it's like, so it's like I can never find those Arizona energy drinks anymore because everyone else wants to buy the cheapest energy drink possible, and those are normally like $1.25, and they're always gone now. It's like those items are always off the shelf. And
Chris, I'm gonna call it quits here, man.
oh yeah, sure, man. No, this is good, man. 3 hours is cool. Hey, Josh, I really appreciate you coming on. And one more thing, man. I love the way you conducted yourself on Praise's channel, man. because it's like when you were the way you were interacting with the that one guy, man, yesterday. Rudy. I think you were being real fair with him, man. So
Yeah, I mean, he just we do get carried away sometimes, and we do like go hard on people. But I don't think he was there to have a real conversation. He just wanted to hear himself talk. And I'm not big on people who like you're gonna spend more time complaining that we're cutting you off rather than just asking your questions. So people get cut off. That's what happens, man. I mean, you go on any channel, like people are gonna interrupt you, and you need to have a little bit thicker skin. That's
right. I will say Olive kind of was being a little bit more like if she just would have kind of been a little patient, maybe he could have got his words out. But I'm gonna just say, man, like I feel like you were the way you and this other guy were kind of directing everything. Like I think you guys did really good by trying to be patient and trying to like the way you were trying to manage the whole thing. I think you were managing really well, and I
like the
don't know
good
if you
cop,
heard that
bad
from
cop.
anyone, but I just want to let you know I thought you were managing like that's an ideal way to handle people on that channel. The way you were trying to manage everything.
Well, I appreciate all the feedback, man, and I'm glad that you still come around, and thanks for letting me jump on and just kind of hang out for a little bit.
All right, yeah, man, it's good to have you on, man. And we'll have to have you on again, man. Maybe go over Daniel 9 sometime.
Yeah, man. Anytime, man. God bless.
Yeah, you had some good comments, man. You contributed, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun. I'll talk to you later, all right?
All right, man. You have a good night. So anyway, he said yes, it has to have local involvement. Yeah, the politics definitely need more local involvement because it's like people just. I mean, that's the problem is that I just feel like I'm too much of like the lone sheep out there, and I just wish others would get more involved or just look. I mean, I know it gets kind of difficult looking because if you don't think someone out there is trying to run, it's hard to go look for someone if you don't even think they exist out there. But man, it's like I had a YouTube channel. I've been trying to get my name around. I bring it up occasionally because what I would like to do is like if I do run again, then I can just announce it on my channel. But if everyone keeps unsubscribing because they don't like one thing I say or something, it gets a little frustrating. On it, man, trying to get through to those people though that are on board with Trump. It's pretty alarming because like if I go into like a channel that might have like 1,000 people in it on Rumble or something, if I go in there and I say one negative thing, it's like suddenly everyone wants to ban Hammer if you say one negative thing about Trump. So those people kind of isolate themselves in a box where they won't hear any outside criticism, and they just totally want to live in their own belief zone and protect it. And I feel like people doing that are like really being a complete detriment to society, and it's really depressing because it's like that's it. If they stay on that trajectory, I feel like it's a miracle things are as good as they are right now. I feel like it's an absolute miracle, and that it's by the grace of God. And I just don't know, like how much longer things stay. As I know things look bad for a lot of people, and I don't even know how good they stay even with the way they look bad right now. Because I know with me, having to being forced out of my house, it's like I feel like this is kind of bad, but I mean, I feel like this is good like I feel like I'm going to be looking back on this going, wow, those were some great days. So, but I appreciate it, Eric, man. Well, you know what, Eric? At least you're listening, man. And I know I'm pretty harsh, and you can be harsh back with me too. If you ever feel like, because I understand, like, I'm not the type of person that's going to sit here. It's like, if I was sitting here and teaching something false and you really felt like it was false and you really equated that to being something like that was super bad or something, and in some way, like, okay, like, for instance, it's like, people might think it's like harsh if I say, like, Calvinists to me seem like they worship a different God. And that can be really offensive, right? But let's say you were to say something like equally like that to me, but you had a logic behind it and everything, and you said something to it. It's like just saying something without any logic or rhyme or reason, that might be a little irritating to me. But if it's got logic, some logic to it or something, like, I'm never gonna ban someone for being like, oh, hey, Chris, if this plus this, I see this plus this equaling this, so therefore I think this bad thing about you, about your doctrine and what you teach. I'm never going to get mad at someone, for having an opinion like that. So I'm just letting people know. And you guys can always, if you get real frustrated at me, just say, hey, I'm starting my own channel. I'm going to do my own show right now, right while Chris is doing a show. I'll never kick you guys off. I'll never be mad at you. In fact, I'll even like highlight it. Like, if you're like, oh, I'm going to do my own show, I'll just be like, click, look, they're going to do their own show right now. So, and Sherry says, yes, social media is teaching people to block dissenting voices, and they live in an echo chamber. Yeah, it's horrible, and it's like, man, I saw these Trump prophets on Rumble, and it amazed me that someone on Rumble could make almost $2,000 an hour in donations, and they were just, how weird that Seventh-day Adventist doctrine might look to everyone. Like, I swear they were saying stuff every bit as crazy about prophesying this and prophesying that, and Trump is going to have like, there's like this secret force that's behind Trump, and one of these days you're going to look on your cell phone and you're going to be seeing, like, they're just going to hijack your phone one day, and they're going to show you that these indictments are going on. Like, they got like all this kind of stuff. And I mean, I would never even, like, years ago, I wouldn't even like think that people would just go along with that. Maybe some small, tiny groups of people might be, crazy enough to get just to go that insane. But like, to see the amounts of people, like when you see like the largest channels on Rumble viewing things like that, and you got 20,000 live viewers at once on this one channel, I think they had 20,000 live viewers. I mean, I was like, I left their channel and came back a couple of times because I didn't know if it was like some kind of glitch. And I was like, wow, 20,000 people listening to this at once, and this person is just making thousands per hour. And it's just like that's kind of like, I don't know, that's a little depressing to me, to be honest. It's like a little crazy, man. It's like, with the way everything's looking, and people can sit there and do that, and it's just like their eschatology was just nuts. And of course, like something about Daniel's 70th week being future, and then all this crazy stuff about Trump. I think one of them was a channel called Elijah Streams. And I just glanced through there and I was like, this is insane. And I think he had almost at least 10,000 live viewers at one single time, making at least it look like $2,000 an hour in donations. Oh, you tried to talk to a street prophet a few weeks ago. Oh, that's interesting. But hey, guys, this show's went 3 hours. I'm gonna hang it up because I feel like I'm kind of feel like Josh picked a good time to go. I think it's a good time for me to go. Appreciate everyone for watching. Hope we all learned something. Hope I wasn't too much of a waste of people's time. And thank you.